Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the MoeGamer Podcast. I'm Pete Davison from MoeGamer.net, and as usual, I'm joined by my good friend Chris Caskey from MrGilderPixels.com. How are you doing today?
Oh, just peachy. It's actually a nice day outside today. So.
Yeah, the sort of newsworthy heat wave we've had seems to have passed now. It's just gone back to sort of what you'd expect summer in the UK to be like now, instead of whatever tropical nonsense we were suffering a few weeks back.
So like just mildly awful, but not completely awful.
It's not even really awful now. It's just sort of it's blue sky, but there's a few clouds up there. There's a gentle breeze. It's just nice and warm. It's not the kind of weather where you walk outside and you're immediately drenched in your own sweat without having done anything, which is what it was a few weeks back. But we've had a few rainstorms since then, and that's helped things out a bit. So.
Good.
Yeah, right. Okay, so today's episode, we're finally getting around to one of our long-promised Evercade episodes. So we're going to be talking a bit about the Evercade system and some of the highlights from the launch library that we've explored so far. But before that, we've got our usual two parts that come before that. So we're going to talk a bit about the news, and then we're going to talk a bit about what we've been playing recently. Now, it's been a fairly moribund collection of news recently, hasn't it? So there's not a ton to talk about, but we've got a few stories, and I'm sure we'll manage to rattle on for 45 minutes regardless. I was going to say, we'll stretch an hour. We'll stretch an hour out of this garbage that I've managed to cobble together. All right. Okay, so first thing I wanted to mention was that P-Cube announced a game that they're working on, which is a new survival horror game called Tormented Souls, which is very, very heavily inspired by the original Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark. And indeed, if you look at it, the whole aesthetic is very similar to Resident Evil Remake specifically. It's got that sort of slightly desaturated look, and the pre-rendered backgrounds and the fixed camera angles and all that sort of thing. This looks like it's going to be great, so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of this. There's a teaser website up for that now. There's a trailer and a bit of information about the game, so if you're interested in classic survival horror, sort of before Resident Evil 4 style survival horror, then this is definitely going to be one you want to keep an eye on.
I very much got like Silent Hill 3, like PS2 era Silent Hill vibes off it. Yeah,
kind of. The sort of design of the main character is vaguely reminiscent of Heather, isn't it? And there's obviously some weird stuff going on. So yeah, looks pretty cool. This is due to come out on Steam and consoles in 2021. It's already on the Steam store, so you can add it to your wish list. And that's apparently quite helpful for developers if you do that, because it helps them get more exposure on the Steam store as well. So the more people wishlist it, the more people get it shown to them through Steam's algorithm and so on. So if this is something that you're interested in and that you believe in and you want more people to know about, then be sure to wishlist that on Steam, even if you plan on picking up the console version. So yeah, not a ton more to say on that as yet, but it certainly looks very cool, and we'll be seeing that next year, all being well. Next thing we've got is that a little while back Sega announced that they're doing one of these mini arcade things, specifically inspired by their Astro City arcade cabinet. We've got a release date for that now. It's December the 17th of 2020. That's confirmed for Japan at the moment. There's no word on a worldwide release, I don't think, is there?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so so it's set for December the 17th of 2020. There'll be 12,800 yen, which is, I don't know, about $120, $130 or so. It's going to have 36 games on it. They haven't revealed all of them yet, but there's a nice selection of Sega classics on there. So we've got Bonanza Brothers, Column, we've got Cotton on there, which is particularly noteworthy.
There's some bangers on here, man.
Yeah. So it's some real cool stuff here. So it includes some stuff that we've seen on a lot of Sega compilations before, but also some stuff we don't see quite so often as well. Isn't this is the first time Golden Axe Revenge of Death Adder's had a home release, isn't it, I think?
Which one is Revenge of Death Adder? Is that the last?
I can't remember. I'm not very well up on my I'm not very well up on my Golden Axe, but I know that this is the one that has never had a home port.
The Duel is the fighting game. Yeah, Revenge of Death Adder is the last arcade beat 'em up, and yes, that's never had a home. That's never been available in the home before.
So yeah, that and Cotton are two particular reasons that people are excited for this. Because
also Dark Edge is on this, which is kind of cool.
I don't know that one. What's that all about?
So Dark Edge is a curious but not particularly good fighting game of the early 32-bit era.
Okay.
With massive, beautiful sprites.
Right.
That do this weird thing where they, like, rotate around each other.
Okay.
And, like, the backgrounds are, like, parallax. And there's a lot of, like, major, like, zoom in, zoom out. It's beautiful and like, it's not, like I said, it's not particularly good, but it's a real interesting curiosity in terms of, like, development tricks and, like, visual presentation of that specific era of arcade games.
Yes.
Very much worth looking at. Also, this thing's loaded with Monster Boy stuff.
Yes, yeah.
I mean Wonder Boy stuff. Some of which aren't even the arcade game. Like Monster Land is on here, and that's not really a.
Yeah.
Oh no, that is one of the arcade ones. I'm sorry, that's the first arcade one. Yeah. This is great. Wonder Boy 3 and Monster Lair, which is the weird shmup one that nobody ever talks about, is on here. Some of the great Shinobi stuff. Like, this is just cool. And, like, there's little accessories for it. You can get a little stool for it and a stand to put it on, so it looks just like the arcade setup.
Yeah. Apparently, the stand for it as well, you can use as a coin bank as well, so you can actually put coins into it.
Cute.
Which is awesome. Yeah, so this is cool. Like I say, you may well end up having to import this if you want it, but it's it's certainly looking very cool. $120, not a terrible price for this sort of thing, particularly considering it's a pretty cool display piece as well as being a functional mini console as well. And presumably there'll be TV out on this as well, like on the Neo Geo thing as well. So if you don't want to play on a tiny screen, you can do. Cool.
That's fairly price parable with the Geo one too. I think the Geo one was 100 or 120.
Yeah, sounds about right.
At launch, so.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. It is the 10th anniversary of the Neptunia series, and as part of the celebrations for that, Compile Heart revealed the first Neptunia game for PlayStation 5. So I finally got a reason to buy a PS5, which is. So this new game is going to be called Go-Go 5D Game Neptune Reverse. Not a ton of details about it as yet, but it's sounding like this is going to be a new mainline release in the series, in as much as the series even has a mainline anymore. There's a 5 in the title, which I guess sort of makes sense if you ignore the fact that Neptunia V2 could also be read as Neptunia 7, because it was actually the 7th Neptunia game in the mainline, but also the 4th. And you see how people get confused about the mainline of this series now.
I'm just excited to buy a PS5 to play a Neptunia game on the PS5 that will finally look as good as a PS4 game.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I had to throw a dig.
Yeah. So I don't think there's really any even sort of screenshots or footage of this yet. It's just been announced that it exists. But if you're a Neptunia fan, go and have a look at Compile Heart's Neptunia 10th anniversary page. So there's a whole bunch of cool stuff on there. So there's messages from some of the voice actresses. They did an interview with Tsuneko and the series creator on Twitch as well. Idea Factory International got involved with that as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on there to celebrate the anniversary. So if you're a fan of the series, go and have a look, because there's a lot of cool stuff. All right, going back to sort of home console arcade things, there's a MVSX Neo Geo system planned for launch in 2020 apparently. And there'll be $450 and $500 options, depending on what you have on it. So this is a very authentic-looking Neo Geo-style cabinet. It's designed for sort of tabletop and bar-top use, so it doesn't have like the bottom unit and you put it on something. It's 25 inches tall, weighs 28 pounds, and has a 17-inch screen with 1280 by 1024 resolution, so it should look very nice. It doesn't support cartridges, so it's just, you can just play the built-in games on it, but almost certainly someone will have hacked it within a week of it being launched, so if you want to add other stuff to it, you probably can do. There's an additional base you can get for it, and you can get the whole shebang together for $500 if you do want a full-size arcade unit as well. So,
I mean, there's 50 games on this thing. It's pretty robust.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's mostly the same games that were on the little tabletop one, the little toy one. But you can get all 6 of the first Metal Slug titles for.
Yep.
Samurai Showdown 1 through 5 and 5 Special, Sengoku 1 through 3. I know we talked about how great Sengoku 3 is in our beat 'em up episode. Yep. Savage Rain, Kazuna Encounter is a $500 game in and of itself. So this is cool. I normally don't care for these. These have been around for a while now. These tabletop arcade units with the expandable bases. I don't know if they've been in your region, but they've been in the States for a while. Like Konami got on board with them, so you can get like the Turtles beat 'em ups and stuff.
Yeah, there was what they called the arcade one-up ones. I think that people were going apeshit for a while back.
Yeah, but this is the Neo Geo, so I care.
Yeah, I get the impression this is intended to be a slightly more premium model than those as well, because it's quite a bit more expensive than the arcade one-ups, isn't it? I think.
Yes, yeah. So this has got my attention more so than the little desktop ones did, because I can specifically see where I'd put this in my house, and I don't know. Anything Neo Geo related I get excited about. It's just, there's something about the specific appearance of the Neo Geo arcade cabinet that I love from a design aesthetic. That bright red with the white.
Yeah.
And the diagonal striping on the joystick panel.
Yeah.
Like, just, it looks like a proper cabinet, and I just get excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, it gets your attention, doesn't it? Like, it's all primary colors on there. Like, you've got red, yellow, green, blue, bit of white, so it's all bright primary attention grabbing colors. So yeah, you can see how it would have grabbed people's attention in the arcade, and it'll be very, very striking to have in your home as well. But I don't think I've got anywhere I could put one of those, unfortunately. I mean, I could put it on my dining table, but I don't think my wife would talk to me again after that.
I have been in talks with a guy in my area to potentially get an actual MVS cab, so maybe I'll hold off. Because that's starting to look like it might be a reality.
Oh, that's exciting. Cool. Well, so October 2020 for this, from the look of things. And the full game list is announced now, so you can go and find that full list on there. Like I say, there's a lot of King of Fighters, a lot of Metal Slug, a lot of Samurai Showdown. You've got Shock Troopers on there as well. Not the second one, though. And some stuff that I'm not super familiar with as well, but... Yeah, the main attraction for this is probably going to be all the fighting games on it, as it often is for the Neo Geo stuff. But yeah, some good stuff on there. All right, moving along, we've got a release date. Well, we've got a vague release date for Oceanhorn 2, which was previously an Apple Arcade exclusive. This is a sort of Zelda-style game. The first Oceanhorn was available pretty widely, but Oceanhorn 2 started on Apple Arcade, and it's now coming to Switch in fall, autumn of this year. So, I don't know a ton about this series, but I know you're quite taken with it, so...
Yeah, so I love the original Oceanhorn. I believe we talked about it back when we did our episode focused on games with a unique toy-like
Yes,
aesthetic.
I think we did, yeah.
Because the original Oceanhorn is very much just it's basically a third-party new Zelda game from the overhead perspective, but there's just something about its graphics that it has a very like tangible physical feel to it, and so from a whole presentation perspective, I found it very like endearing and kind of irresistible. And Oceanhorn 2 is just like a full transformation of one's classic top-down Zelda feel to like the Zelda 64 feel.
Yeah.
We've now got like an open world third-person kind of feel, third-person. Like behind the back camera when you pull like a bow and arrow or a slingshot out. Like, it's a really lovely looking game. And it just kind of continues that look by having a very polished Western CG look. It just feels kind of like a I want to say like a Disney CG movie. Like it looks like a playable Frozen, right? Like everything has this very smooth toy-like sheen to it, and I'm just very taken with the way it looks, and it appears to play very smooth, and it's kind of got a charming aesthetic, and I don't know, I enjoyed the first one enough to get super excited about this, so. And it belongs on the Switch, because everything does.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking of everything belonging on the Switch, Pikmin 3 is coming to the Switch in a deluxe form. So not only is this a port of the Wii U game, it's also some additional content in there that features Louis and Olimar in sort of prologue and epilogues as well. So you can play the campaign in 2-player co-op. There's new difficulty options, a hint system, and all sorts of things as well. Pikmin 3 is actually the only Pikmin game I've played to date, but I enjoyed that a lot on Wii U. So again, it's good to see it getting a wider release on Switch.
And I'm in the opposite bag. Like Pikmin 3 is the only Pikmin game I haven't played, so I'm very excited about this because I haven't played it.
Yeah. This is going to be quite interesting though, because Pikmin 3 was one of those games that made quite effective use of the gamepad touchscreen, because there was a lot of sort of flicking things around and twanging them around using the touchscreen and that sort of thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that translates to sort of standalone play on the TV. Obviously, you can still do the touchscreen stuff if you're playing Switch in handheld mode, but not if you've got it connected to a TV. But I'm sure they've thought of all that. And yeah, so this is a cool game. It's a lot of fun, and again, further evidence that Nintendo is keen for some of its best games from the Wii U era that no one played, but which were very well received, are getting a wider release, and that's a good thing. One interesting thing to note about this is that ahead of Pikmin 3 Deluxe coming out on Switch, which is supposedly in October, Pikmin 3 has disappeared from several regions' Wii U eShops as well. So if you wanted a digital download version of that on Wii U, in a lot of places you can't get that anymore. You can still obviously buy a disc version, but if you wanted a download version, you're out of luck now until October.
Yeah, I wonder how likely it is one day that a Switch adaptation of the Star Fox game for the Wii U could happen. with all the touchscreen malarkey excised and reworked. I don't know. It wouldn't even be the same game. That stuff was so integral to the way that game was made.
I mean, it wasn't really touchscreen in Star Fox. It was more the motion controls, but it was the fact that you had to sort of look at what was going on the gamepad to aim truly precisely with those motion controls. So I don't know. I mean, it would sort of be possible, but I don't know if it would be more effort than it's worth. They at this point they will probably just reboot Star Fox again for the 5th time or whatever it is.
Yeah, it bothers me every day of my life that there's a Platinum game I don't like.
That's a shame. I did actually really enjoy that game. It does have a learning curve, and so many people get put off quite early because of that learning curve, and because it is quite awkward initially. Once you get the hang of it, it is a lot of fun. But I completely understand why some people aren't on board with that. But yeah, yes. All right. Continuing on, we've got a Shantae art book on the way, which has apparently been on the way for a very long time. It was first announced back at the 2017 San Diego Comic-Con, and now there's an Amazon listing suggesting it will launch on December the 1st of 2020. I'd take that with a pinch of salt, because first of the month release dates on Amazon are often placeholders, but it does look as if this is getting close to release now. So the publisher Udon has also said to people that they wouldn't have to wait too much longer for the art book. And they've sort of had a bit of merchandise recently as well. So if that listing is accurate, you can expect this in December of 2020, and it will cost about $50. And that will go nicely with the re-releases of the original Shantae from Limited Run Games, which is coming in September. Oh god, it's coming in September. Why do I have to spend all my money at the same time?
I just dropped $126 at Limited Run yesterday because of stupid Last Blade 2 and Samurai Jack, and then Gunvolt Burst is coming next Friday.
Yep, definitely picking that up.
And
definitely picking that up. I'm definitely picking Shantae up. There's still some open pre-order stuff that they have running until the end of this weekend at the time of recording. I'm in an hour in it over. I would quite like a hard copy of Fault, the visual novel.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about that.
But yeah, frustratingly, the open pre-order for that expires like the week before Mighty Gunvolt Burst releases, so I'd end up getting stung for their expensive shipping twice, which is a real bummer.
Not day of. Usually it's Friday to Friday. So.
No, they've said it's ending on Sunday, so which is.
It's one of is it one of their distributed titles? Yeah. Those have a different date range.
Yeah. So that's a bit of a bummer, but I might just have to suck it up and do it anyway because, cool. 90% of my Switch library is limited run stuff at this point, so there's no reason to change that at this point.
Same. No complaints, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, carrying on. Next thing we've got is that Torchlight 3 will exit early access and launch for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC this fall, apparently. So if you buy through Steam, you'll get the exclusive Red Fairy Pet because digital download exclusivity platform, whatever. So I haven't seen anything about Torchlight 3, to be honest. I've not really seen anyone talking about it, but Torchlight is a series. It's a lot of fun, certainly.
Yes.
Have you looked at any of this at all?
Yeah, it's this is curious, right? Because if you remember a couple months ago when Torchlight 3 was announced, there was a lot of talk about maybe it was going to do something different and be this online social developing world. Kind of thing.
I do remember that. Yeah,
but now it's clearly just Torchlight 3.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they abandoned or what changed about those initial ideas, but if you watch the footage, it's just more Torchlight. This is great. Because I didn't want that other game that they were talking about. I just want bigger, better, modern Torchlight, which this appears to be. It's just hectic. There looks like there's shit happening everywhere in the video footage they've shared, and it just looks like more Torchlight. Same charming, cartoony, steampunky world. They've announced the character classes.
Yeah, so I was just going to say these sound quite entertaining. So you've got an enchanter, so fairly standard fantasy type stuff, and you've got a sharpshooter. Then you've got a robot, and you've got a guy who attacks with a heavily armed battle train.
Yeah. So that's always been Torchlight's thing is it plays off the steampunk setting to give it kind of a I don't know if steampunk is the right word, right? Because it's not Victorian. It's it's a weird steam medieval hybrid. It's a very unique,
it's very sort of
a fantasy. It's
very sort of
steam.
Warcrafty, isn't it? Which is kind of understandable given the background of the original ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a very kind of World of Warcraft type aesthetic to it. So there's sort of high fantasy stuff going on, but then there's also industrial stuff happening in there as well, and it's quite a pleasing aesthetic.
Yeah, I just love it. So I can't wait for this. I'm happy that it's on the Switch. I still have to pick up the Switch version of 2 because I would very much like to replay that on my TV because I only ever played that on Steam before. Just fun. More, Diablo 3 on the Switch is the best. It's the best. We had so much fun with that. So I'm always on the lookout for new of these type of overhead hack and slash loot games. We had a ton of fun with Snack World. Yep. So this is just more possibility for that kind of fun to me. In a series I know is great and has always been great.
Yeah.
So Torchlight.
Yeah, cool. And if that's not enough isometric hack and slash dungeon crawlers for you, Supergiant Games is also working on a roguelike dungeon crawler called Hades for Switch, which will have cross-save functionality with the PC version, which is currently available in early access and has been since 2018. So this looks like it's got Supergiant's very distinctive kind of isometric perspective with its solid animation and stuff, and then it's combining it with, rather than a fixed narrative, it's more roguelike and inspired by Greek mythology from the look of things. So this looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I love Supergiant's work. I haven't played Pyre yet, but I love Transistor and Bastion, so I just got super excited about this.
Yeah, so this looks cool, and you can play it now if you're happy to play the early access version on either Epic Games Store or Steam, and then the Switch version is coming out later this year, so presumably that will coincide with the launch of the full version on PC as well, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's been quite well regarded too. I believe the Penny Arcade guys really loved it
that's
when
good.
it first launched. That makes sense. That makes sense. So they like Supergiant stuff in general. They were one of the first people who really sold Pyre on me. I haven't played it yet, like I said, but it was basically their recommendation that put it on my short list. Are you familiar with Pyre?
Is that that the weird sort of sports one, or am I thinking of something different?
Yeah, it's like a visual novel fantasy sports game. You recruit your dudes and then you play a weird fantasy I think it's mostly basketball.
Okay.
It was kind of described, but completely with this fantasy skin over it. So you're mages passing this energy ball back and forth. And but it is basketball.
Yeah.
It's all it's a basketball visual novel cloaked in a fantasy universe with a ton of character development. Nothing about that doesn't sound curious and worth checking out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll have to give that a look. I remember hearing a bit about that back when it was first announced, I think, but I've never looked into it since. So, but yeah, sounds cool.
Honestly, the only reason I haven't checked it out yet is because there's been no physical version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, as with so many things. Nice segue into another chance to own Ikaruga physically. Nicalis are doing a limited print physical version of Ikaruga for PlayStation 4 and Switch on October the 27th in North America, and that will set you back $60. But it has got a few extra bits and pieces in there. It's got the game, it's got a heavy outer box, whatever that means, presumably just a cardboard box, and then a steel model kit of the Ikaruga ship, assembly required. A heavy stock instruction manual, which is worthy of its own bullet point these days, and a sticker with the word warning on it.
Yeah, it appears to be the graphic for when a boss is coming.
Yeah, I think so.
The sticker, the warning. Yeah, which is kind of one of those legendary ones. The Ikaruga one is I forget what the English on it says, but it's it's great.
Yeah.
I don't know. This game is like super formative for me. I don't know. I'm like, so Ikaruga was the first game I ever imported. Mm-hmm. Like when I like started to have money, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna start importing games. Like I still have the Dreamcast version, like that I imported back in the day. The only thing I don't like about this is like it's kind of chintzy. I don't know, like it should be like a Ikaruga Radiant Silvergun 2-pack. Like I don't know. Either way, Team Treasure. So anything that has treasure on it, I will buy.
Yeah, for sure. Besides the Nicalis version, there's also a Japanese version which is coming out on September the 24th as well. So you might be able to import that from somewhere if, for whatever reason, you're not able to get hold of this one, or you don't want to order from Nicalis or whatever. So, yeah, be sure to look around. Okay, what else have we got? Another sort of Amazon-based rumor here. Amazon UK apparently listed Zelda Skyward Sword for Switch, which again doesn't necessarily mean that's going to happen, but it is noteworthy that this has appeared, because this is one Zelda game that people have been particularly keen to see a remaster of, just because the Wii one was so heavily reliant on the motion controls, and people really want a version where you don't have to do that.
Yes. That's why I posted this. I was like, just please.
Yeah.
Like, it's beautiful to dream. I've wanted this forever.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, Nintendo have been saying for a long time that they've got no plans to do this, and the Amazon UK listing says it will release on January the 1st of 2030, and it's also not listed in the video games department. So who knows?
I would buy this I would buy a Switch version of Skyward Sword in 2030.
Yeah, same probably. So yeah, nothing announced there as yet, but it is rumored, so it may well happen. And yeah, given the demand for it, Nintendo would be foolish not to follow through on that, I think. Right, what else have we got? Ketsui Deathtiny Kizuna Jigoku Tachi is getting a Western release from the look of things, as it had some PlayStation Store listings leaked.
Yeah, this is part of M2's Shot Triggers series, which has been amazing.
Yes.
You know, their re-release of Battle Gaea was top-notch, super top-notch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know much about this game. The Ketsui series is not something I've been super into, but more shmups are never a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I don't know it well either. It's by Cave, isn't it?
Yes, that's the big noteworthy piece of info.
Yeah, that's it's a Cave one I'm not super familiar with, but yeah, will be cool if we get some more of this M2 shot trigger stuff over here, because I mean M2 really know what they're doing with porting stuff to newer platforms and wringing out the best possible performance from them. So, and have their other stuff has had some limited run releases, hasn't it? I think.
Oh yeah, the Battle Gaea did. Like, it changed my life. I could finally own Battle Gaea physically without spending like $100.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, if this comes out in the West, then there's a good chance that you might be able to own a copy of this to put on your shelf as well, so that will be cool. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that one. What else have we got? The spiritual successor to the Momodora series, which is called Minoria, is coming to PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Switch on September the 10th for $20. So this is coming through Dangan Entertainment. And
they're great.
And it first launched last year on PC. So these are the new console versions of it. Have you played or familiar with this one at all?
I've not played Minoria. I am familiar with the Momodora series, though. I don't know. Have you watched the footage for this thing? It is gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah, it is absolutely lovely. Some gorgeous animations. Very nice sort of sense of style to it all. Lots of interesting effects and things. And it's... Yeah, the I don't know how you describe it. It's kind of sort of flat-shaded animation style, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's like really slick and smooth character animation in there as well that sort of gives it a very kind of animated movie feel to it in a lot of places.
It very much appears to be that this kind of like the modern thing that I mean, I'm not sure about the process that was used to make it, but it looks like how Arc System Works does their deal, where they're taking 3D models and then mapping 2D to it. Because like this level of fluidity in the animation isn't really possible with traditional pixel art. But the textures mapped to these models are low res, so that it looks like pixel art. Which is a shift from the Momodora games, are like solid, proper traditional pixel art. So it's interesting to see them taking this in a new direction. But it's just the aesthetic of it is this beautiful, like washed out, low color, kind of somber color palette, which I really appreciate. The Momodora games were the same. New action side scroller where you get to be a cute nun with a sword. Okay.
Sounds good to me. It's worth noting that this is not a sequel to Momodora. This is a spiritual successor. So it will probably play quite similarly, but it's got this new aesthetic and so on. And to go along with that, there is a new Momodora game on the way as well, which is a celebration of the series' 10th anniversary. There's a teaser trailer out for it so far. But it's only about a minute long and doesn't really tell us anything. But yeah,
it's just exciting that it exists.
Yeah, exactly. A new Momodora game is happening as well as Minoria, so keep an eye out for that as well. What's next? Street Fighter V Champion Edition DLC. This was announced a little while back at the time of recording, but yeah, we've got some new characters coming for Street Fighter V. If anyone still cares, so we got Dan.
I don't normally care about Street Fighter news at all, but these are all great characters.
Yes.
So I got super excited.
Yeah, so we got Dan Hibiki, we've got Rose, Oro, and the one that was most interesting to me was Akira Kazama from Rival Schools, which, as far as I know, is the first time Capcom has even acknowledged Rival Schools' existence for about 20 years. So
I was going to say, anytime Rival Schools gets acknowledged in any way, it's newsworthy.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
also, I love Rose. Like, in love with Rose.
This does not surprise me, looking at the way she looks and imagining what she sounds like. So the plan for these four characters is Dan is planned to launch in winter of 2020. Rose is coming next spring. Oro is coming in summer of 2021. And then Akira is also coming in summer of 2021. So they will be sort of drip feeding those out over the course of the next year or so. So... yeah, if you're still playing Street Fighter V, hang in there. You've got some cool characters on the way. All right. I think that is pretty much everything we had on our list. So is there anything else you want to bring up before we move on?
No, I think that's it. I mean, so much of like what's been going on lately has just been like rumors and like drips and drabs of like single sentence stuff.
Yeah.
Like I did hear recently that Capcom renewed the Darkstalkers trademark, but that probably doesn't mean shit. It just means they're protecting their trademark. So who knows? Did we talk about the Street Fighter guy leaving Capcom? That was since the previous.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We
right?
didn't mention that, did we? So, what's his name? I've forgotten his name.
Ono.
Yeah.
It's Ono, right?
Yeah. Hold on. Let me. Street Fighter. Ono. Yoshinori Ono. Yeah. So he left Capcom on August the 9th, or rather he announced that he was going to be leaving Capcom this summer on August the 9th. And this is noteworthy because he's been the producer on the franchise since 1998, so he's been sort of very much the face of the series for a very long time.
Yeah.
And he's moving on to do his own thing. I don't think he's announced what he's doing next. But
so keep an eye out on Kickstarter.
Yeah, either keep an eye out on Kickstarter or keep an eye on Arc System Works, I suspect.
That would be the logical thing. Could you imagine the like what would happen in the fighting game community if Ono went over to Arc System Works?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole fighting game community has kind of been a bit in flux recently, anyway, with all sorts of drama going on that we won't get into now, but. Yeah,
the fighting game community can eat my butt. Like I just like fighting games because it's fun character design and fun to play with my friends locally. Like I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care about any of it. I just live in my little bubble where I get happy about character design and local.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't really give a shit either, but there were some people conjecturing that this move may have been related to the recent drama and he wanted a fresh start. I mean, the drama wasn't surrounding him at all, I hasten to add, but it may have just been that he wanted to detach himself from that community for maybe a little while and then come back and do something when everything had blown over. But I don't know.
That makes sense.
That is all conjecture at the minute, but we'll have to see, I guess.
Capcom has been building a lot of goodwill lately, making some decent stuff, but there's always like their handling Street Fighter V and like their handling of Street Fighter V is so negatively thought of, and not just the fighting game community, but the gaming community in general. That he would be wise to step back. I don't know how much of what's gone on with Street Fighter V was him. I conjecture that he probably did his best to fight against the corporate stuff that made it what it is. Yeah. I mean, I hope. But I mean, going back to Darkstalkers, like, how many times in the past 5 years has he been like on Twitter, like, all I want to do is make a new Darkstalkers, and so who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen? It'd be great if he teamed up with those Eureka guys. You remember they did that Fighting Lair EX?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because that's all got its roots in classic Capcom as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that that's the one that people think is like a spiritual successor to? Was it Street Fighter Alpha?
Street Fighter EX.
EX, that's the 3D
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is. It has characters from that. Like, the original characters that Eureka created, they were allowed to continue using.
Oh, that's cool.
So, like, it takes place in the same universe as Street Fighter EX. It just doesn't have the Street Fighter characters in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, they maintain creative control of the original characters they created for the EX series. So only the traditional Street Fighter characters don't appear in it.
Oh, that's neat.
So that'd be cool. It'd be cool if he teamed up with those guys.
Yeah. All right, if that's everything then, we'll take a short break and then we'll come back and we'll talk about what we've been playing recently. So we'll see you in just a sec.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh, George again.
Ooh, Atari's ASCII battle.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
Sorry, only our demonstrators left.
Mine!
No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
Welcome back. For our second segment, we're going to talk a bit about what we've been playing recently. So, Chris, hit me. What have you been up to?
Well, pursuant to our most recent discussions about our recently rediscovered love of like one generation ago, I guess 2 generations ago, the PS3 and the 360. I've just been amassing like a stupid amount of PS3 and 360 games for like $10.
Yep, same.
And just like diving deep into that shit. So like I haven't really been playing anything like hardcore, like dedicated lately. I've just been like every night putting like an hour to an hour and a half into my like recent weird old game acquirements. So like one of the things I wanted to talk about today was Guilty Gear 2 Overture.
Is that that's the one that isn't a fighting game, right?
That's the one that's not a fighting game.
Yeah.
That's the one that's League of Legends, but from a third-person perspective, set in the Guilty Gear universe. So yeah, I mean, I think when it first came out, everyone shat on it because it wasn't a fighting game. But like, you know how like some of these companies get weird with their like titling. So like, sequels to the Guilty Gear fighting games aren't numbered sequels. That's Guilty Gear and Guilty Gear X and then Guilty Gear X2. So like the fighting games are their own line. So like I guess the original reasoning behind this being Guilty Gear 2 was like if it's Guilty Gear 2 and not Guilty Gear X, the numbered sequels are going to be explorations of the Guilty Gear universe with different genres. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Guilty Gear 2 is a MOBA, but from a third person, so it's got a little bit of Dynasty Warriors flavor to it. Yeah. But you're third person and you're controlling your character. So like unlike traditional MOBAs, which come from Warcraft DNA with the overhead clicky model, you're actually controlling your dude on the ground. You've got moves, you can do combos, jump, dash, and it's literally just a MOBA. You have control points and towers that you have to take down. The enemy towers are consistently producing little AI-controlled fighters that you have to kind of hack down on your way to the tower to take it. And then you encounter the enemy masters, as they call them, which are like the big characters. And then you like fight with them. And then it feels like a 3D arena fighting game. Like you can lock on to them and then there's like combos and knockbacks. Like there's a little bit of fighting game DNA baked into it when you have the duels with the master characters. So it's really interesting. I don't know if it's something I could really dig into in a serious way because I just don't do well with like a real-time strategy element games. My brain just can't wrap around it, so I get bogged down really quickly just like trying to like have the duels and stuff, and then I forget to actually like protect my choke points and like control my dudes and stuff. So I'm not good at it. It's just the kind of game that doesn't mesh well with my brain. But you know, as we're often talking about, like I'm glad I own it. I'm glad I've played it. It's a really curious game, like doing interesting things with mashing up different genres. And I've really enjoyed checking it out and learning more about it because I really like Guilty Gear as a franchise, the lore, the character design. So it's been very cool for me to finally like kind of explore this kind of black sheep of the series. Yeah. Other stuff I've been playing in a similar vein. Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
You made a start on that, did you? Cool.
Yeah, I did, and I remember playing the demo back when it first was coming out, and I remember just hating it. Like, absolutely hating it. But I think it's one of those examples where, like, sometimes a demo can do more damage to your perception of a game than it can do good. Yeah. Because a demo often straddles this fine line between putting you into a point in a game where you are seeing some cool stuff, right? Like sometimes a demo doesn't start you at the beginning of a game because that's kind of boring and no one wants to play like the opening hour and a half of a game in a demo. You want to be like at the point where you've got a couple cool powers and like neat stuff is going on. Yeah. But for some games, especially where there's an interesting learning curve or unique mechanics, that can be really hurtful, right, to the experience you have because you need to be weaned into the cool stuff. Yeah. So I remember the Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts demo, like, plopping you into this mission where you had to, like, build a vehicle that was, like, pursuant to playing this, like, soccer game with trucks, which was really challenging because you didn't really know how to do all the things it wanted you to do to successfully execute on it.
Right.
Whereas playing Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts from the beginning, owning it, it starts you out with tiny vehicles that can't really do much and teaches you how to build and modify them and like how to actually exist in its world, which is like now after playing it for like 2 hours last night, I feel like I would be able to tackle that challenge in the demo that frustrated me. So it's just kind of an interesting treatise on like how demos can be dangerous. So Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts is technically the third Banjo-Kazooie game. And what's different about it is instead of just being a traditional platformer, like a collectathon 3D character platformer, it introduces vehicles. So the whole point of the game is vehicles that you can build and modify using this really interesting, almost Lego-like system where you collect components that are essentially like cubes and like prisms and like you literally build these vehicles Lego style, or you can just purchase blueprints of functional vehicles that you can construct based on the parts you own that you don't actually have to use the builder yourself. But then you can modify those as you wish. So using what was at the time like the revolutionary power of the 360, right? It's it's more heavily based on like physics. And the worlds are huge to accommodate the fact that you're driving and flying around them in vehicles. So it's really interesting, and I was really struck by how fun it is because of the scale of these environments.
Yeah.
They're big. And like the hub world is tremendous. Like, I just explored the hub world for like 45 minutes last night, and it's like full of collectibles and unlockables. Like the hub world is one of the places where you find the crates that contain the components you need to build the vehicles. So you're encouraged to treat the hub like a level in and of itself, and to really just spend time navigating that and looking for like interesting navigation puzzles and like, oh well, here's a slope that I can't get up, but 2 missions later you might unlock the grip tires that allow you to climb slippery slopes. So there's a whole huge kind of gate and key mechanic where the more you play, the more components you unlock, the more functionality you unlock, leads to more things you can access. A mission that you may have been able to complete, but not complete with a good enough time to get like the best trophy for time. You might be able to come back 2 hours later with a vehicle with better tires, lower weight, and complete it with a better time. So there's a ton of emphasis on interesting replay to try to attain better times, tweak your vehicles. It's really, really cool. And really, really charming and stupid. The whole thing is built around this sense of humor where, like, the entire story is that Banjo and Kazooie have become irrelevant. Like, I don't know. So like, because it had been 10 years since Banjo-Tooie on the N64 and Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. Like a whole 10 years. So like, the game opens like in the setting of the original Banjo-Kazooie Spiral Mountain, where like the original games take place, and like Banjo-Kazooie are just like, they have gained a ton of weight and they're just eating pizza and they don't care. They're like, well, we banished like what's the witch's name? Gruntilda. They're like, well, we banished Gruntilda in the last game. It's like, nothing matters. Like, we just live a lazy life and eat pizza. But then like Gruntilda like escapes, like, and comes out, and then like this dude comes down and he's like the master of all video games. It's like his thing. And like, that's the story, and he just makes fun of them for being like irrelevant. He was like, you guys are mascots of like dubious popularity. Like, you're not nearly as cool as that Italian dude. You haven't been in nearly as many games as that Italian dude. Like, I'm gonna make a new game for you because you need to become relevant again. And he just, like, makes fun of them the entire time. And then, like, the first thing he does is, like, let's have some fun. Like, I'm going to make you collect tons of pointless items, just like you used to have to do. And then he, like, snaps his fingers, and the entire landscape becomes covered with, like, these gold pickup items. And he makes you run around and, like, pick them up. And then, like, after, like, 5 minutes of that, he's just like, dude, knock this off. Like, nobody wants to do this anymore. This is stupid. and he's like, I'm going to take you to, like, a world of my creation where, like, you'll do something new and relevant that, like, people actually want to do now. And then it's the physics-based puzzling and vehicle building. But still collectathon. Like, they didn't actually get rid of that. But, like, there's just a whole, like, in-joke about how, like, they've become irrelevant, like the classic 3D platformer is not something people want to engage with anymore, and then continues to make a 3D platformer, but with like new and interesting elements that were pertinent to really the game development scene at the time, which was a really heavy emphasis on physics.
Yeah.
Because that was like super fashionable when that game was made. Yeah, so I'm really enjoying it. It's definitely got its flaws. The physics are not great, and you struggle against them sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to control. It can get a bit frustrating. There's just shit in the way constantly in a way that's not like fun. So like you're driving your like car around town, and it's like if you try to run around on foot in the town, like you'll get a little message that pops up, and some of you are like, "What are you doing?" Like the whole reason we gave you cars is so you don't have to spend too much time on foot. But then like if you drive around, like nobody gets out of the friggin' way, so you're just like hitting like pedestrians all the time, and then you gotta like stop and like flip your car back over. It's like it seems at odds with itself sometimes in a way that can be frustrating. But for like what I paid for it and like the sheer scale of it and like I'm really just enjoying its weirdness and it's interesting. I mean, it's probably one of the last great Rare games.
Yeah.
I mean, although I guess people love that pirate game on the Xbox One. I never played it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of find that hard to think of as kind of classic Rare because that's got a very strong multiplayer focus, hasn't it? I think
it's exclusively multiplayer. There is no single player component.
Yeah. So I mean, to be honest, I imagine that the Rare of today is almost completely different staff-wise to how it was back in those days. Anyway, so yeah.
There's no doubt. Like Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts actually feels like classic Rare.
Yeah.
Like the jokes are there, they're on point. Like when the master of video games like first introduces himself, he's like, I'm like the master of video games. I create all video games. And Kazooie's like even games that don't sell well, like Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Like there's like actual like in jokes about Rare.
Yeah.
And like one of the level worlds you go to is supposed to be the inside of your Xbox. So, like, you go to it, and, like, the first scene in that level is just a disc spinning in front of you, and, like, the Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts disc in the tray. Like, it's full of really cool jokes. Like, every new level you go to has, like a sitcom-style introduction sequence, where it's like, welcome to, like, Banjo Lands. Like, and then all the classic Banjo-Kazooie characters are in each level, but like as different roles because they're playing a role in a game. Like each level you go to is supposed to be a game like the master of games has made. So it's like, starring Mumbo Jumbo like as the farmer. But then in the next level it's like starring Mumbo Jumbo as like the game programmer like in your Xbox. Like so like they take on different roles as like an ensemble cast, and it's like so there's like a cute credits roll for like each new level. It's just full of like cleverness and like funny jokes in that like traditional Rare way.
Yeah, people tend not to talk a lot about Rare from that era, but they did some cool stuff. Like, did you ever play Cameo?
I love Cameo.
Cameo's great.
Absolutely love Cameo. I played the shit out of that game when it first came out. Yeah, and that game got dumped on big time. But I think it was an example of people not wanting that kind of game anymore.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the commentary in Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was came from how like people didn't like Cameo because it was a super traditional 3D adventure game. It just happened to be on new hardware, and people bounced off it because they wanted more. And like even like the master of games comes down in Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, and he's like nobody wants to jump around and collect stuff anymore. Kids want to shoot stuff. Kids want to drive stuff. Like get out of here. Like, and it's true. Like of the time, it was true. Like, these kind of games have seen a massive resurgence in popularity because of guys like you and me, our age, really wanting to relive and enjoy these kind of designs. But there was a time in like the 360 and PS3 era at the very beginning where like the broad populace did not want this kind of traditional stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Looking back on it, it's a really interesting era in general. Just because, because it went on for so long, but two, just because there were so many sort of quantum shifts in the way that developers were doing things, the way that players were responding to things, and all that sort of thing. It's just like while you were living it, you didn't necessarily notice these things, and it was very easy to be cynical about a lot of things in the middle of like the 360 and the PS3 era. But now that we can look back on it, there's so much fascinating stuff going on from that time. And a lot of the most interesting stuff is, as always, the stuff that didn't get particularly well received when it first came out.
For sure.
And that is the stuff that's really cool to explore and talk about now. So, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so I'm just having a hell of a time with this. Other stuff I've picked up recently that I haven't checked out enough to talk about, but I will in future episodes. I recently got Lost Planet 2.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Which I'm having quite a bit of fun with, but I'm not quite at a point where I'm really ready to talk about it from a place of understanding its design. But also, I picked up Remember Me.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Which is one of those like hot and cold games. Like, people either really love Remember Me or really don't understand Remember Me.
Yeah.
Or, like, when I posted online that I got it, like, a friend of mine messaged me and he was like, "That's my favorite game of the PS3 era." Like, so... and this is someone whose opinion I respect. So yeah. I'm really interested to see what that's got going on for it. I mean, Don't Nod have continued to be a fairly prolific developer on like I would say like the tier 2 like semi-independent scene. Like so then that was like their first major published game. So really curious to see what that's got going on for it. I remember the criticisms against it in its day. Something tells me they won't apply to me because I only paid $9.99 for a shrink-wrapped copy. So, so I'm really excited to check it out.
Yeah, cool. That's one I haven't picked up yet, but it's one I've had on my list for a while. So I need to try and get my own copy of that as well. Because it always sounded fascinating to me even back in the day. So I will have to give that a look certainly. Well, is that everything you've been fiddling with lately?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, still gradually grinding away at Trials of Mana in the background, but that's kind of taken a bit of a backseat because I've just been so focused on all this weird new old games I've been buying.
Well, I mean, not to turn this into an impromptu celebration of the Xbox 360 PS3 era, but I mean, I've also been collecting stuff for that and playing a bit of it as well. So, one I want to talk about is one I did a short play video on this week, which is Carrier Command Gaea Mission.
Yes, please tell me all about this.
Yeah, so this game has a really interesting history because the original Carrier Command was a game that originally came out on the 8 and 16-bit home computer platforms in the UK. I don't know if it made it to the States because it was released by like a very British software company. In fact, the software company it was released by was owned by the company that at the time was our national telephone provider.
Oh my, that's bizarre.
Just for a bit of bizarre stuff. Yeah, there was like a big group called Telecomsoft, and then underneath Telecomsoft they had these various different labels. They had Firebird, Rainbird, and Silverbird. Rainbird was the label that was sort of I guess they sort of marketed themselves as kind of games for grown-ups. So stuff on the Rainbird label always came in like really classy packaging, and it had nice sort of manuals and stuff, and the games themselves tended to be a bit more complex. So at the time Carrier Command first came out on the Atari ST, I was a little bit too young to sort of appreciate and understand it, but I remember my dad and my brother enjoying it a great deal, and I used to like watching them play it. And basically the concept behind this game was that you have an aircraft carrier, and you are at one end of this archipelago of islands, and the enemy has a carrier that is slightly better than yours, sitting at the other end of the archipelago of islands, and it is your job to blow up the enemy carrier. which sounds pretty straightforward. But there's a whole bunch of islands in the way that you need to go and capture, and each island has sort of facilities on it that you can sort of put to work for you, so producing resources or manufacturing weapons and vehicles and stuff. And so the whole thing is like this really curious blend between real-time 3D action game where you fly planes and drive tanks and pilot your carrier around and stuff, and sort of fairly large-scale strategy game as well. And it was really ambitious back at the time in the Atari ST, but it was one of those games that kind of really lived up to that ambition. It managed to actually sort of meet the expectations that it was setting in the first place, and it produced a really good, really well-regarded game. And so it's sort of like a real highlight of the Atari ST era for a lot of people. But sort of nothing happened relating to that for quite a long time, and it was always sort of regarded as a retro game. And then in the early 2010s, a company called Bohemia Interactive, who are most well known for their Armour series and the DayZ spin-off, they announced that they were doing a reboot of Carrier Command. And I was like, what? Why is this happening now? And where has this come from? And I kind of want it. Basically, what it was is they managed to acquire the Carrier Command license from somewhere, but they also got the license for this unfinished sci-fi series called Gaea, which was I think it was a series of books, but it was intended to end up being like this sort of grand multimedia franchise with movies and games and all sorts of things. That side of things never happened, so probably one of the most prominent surviving things from this Gaea universe thing was Carrier Command in the end. And so the gist of it is exactly the same as the original Carrier Command. You have an aircraft carrier, the enemy has an aircraft carrier, you need to blow each other up. And but they've wrapped this sort of sci-fi story around it in that you start in this ship around orbit around this moon that is sort of covered with water and so on. So it's all about sort of getting a water supply for your colony and so on. So you come down to this moon, and the campaign mode in the game actually adds an ongoing story to it as well. So rather than just this abstract strategy game with a long-term objective for you to accomplish, if you play the campaign mode, there's a story with characters and so on, and there's sort of first-person shooter segments as well. Like before you get the carry at the beginning of the game, you have to actually go and steal it, basically, in this first-person shooter sequence. But because it's a Bohemia Interactive game based on, I assume it's the same engine as the Armour series, it means that the whole thing is very, very open plan and outdoors and that sort of thing. So
sure,
it's not like a game where you're proceeding down linear paths and so on. There's like lots of different ways to go, and you can explore and all this sort of thing. Then you get hold of the carrier, and it becomes this sort of large-scale strategy game where you command the carrier, and you can launch these flying fighters called mantas to go and scout out things and destroy structures and things, and you can launch these amphibious tanks called walruses to go and capture structures and eventually take over the whole island. And it is a wonderful recreation of this original Atari ST game. In that sort of spiritually and mechanically it's very similar, but it's just brought it up to date for 2012 anyway, with these sort of new aesthetics and lovely weather effects and this narrative component and that sort of thing. It has absolutely terrible pathfinding AI, which is one of the reasons why some people didn't regard it all that well. But in practice, because you're working with such a small number of units at any one time, it's actually more in your interest to take direct control of those units anyway. So if you're leaving them to their own devices, they're probably going to end up in a difficult situation anyway. So I haven't found that to be as huge an issue as some people made out. But it's just really cool to see a game reimagined and be so true to the original. And it's just a fascinating project that I've really been enjoying exploring, because it's done such a great job at what it set out to do.
That's great. I love this specifically, right? Like this kind of game where they take a classic and like reimagine it with modern trappings in a way that actually feels like a logical evolution of the original that it's paying tribute to. Like it'd be so easy to just have had them get the license and remake Carrier Command with like an HD skin, but it was the exact same game. Yeah. Right? Or like, and then have it just be like a download title. But instead they did this. They made like a premium game extrapolating the design philosophy of the original with this modern FPS stuff. And like, that's so neat.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think of other games that have done that reasonably well. I'm at a loss right now, but it's such a cool approach, and I really respect it.
Yeah. And like I say, this is one of those games that kind of just sort of appeared and then dropped off everyone's radar almost immediately because it got fairly mediocre reviews. But coming back to it now, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating game that you can quite easily sink hundreds of hours into, because as well as the main narrative component, there is also a pure strategic mode that plays entirely just like the original game. So if you enjoy playing the game in the original style, you can play it in the original style. And that's just it's cool that they bothered to include that as well, alongside this substantial narrative-driven campaign as well. And yeah, it's just a fantastic reimagining of what they were doing. So yeah, that's very much been a highlight of my my Xbox 360 rediscoveries lately. I picked up a whole bunch of games recently that I haven't had time to check out yet, but I'm going to make a bit of time for these over the course of the coming weeks. Like, there's all sorts of really interesting stuff I want to look at. Like, I want to play with some of Bizarre Creations' weirder stuff, like the club that they did is quite an interesting third-person shooter from what I remember.
Yeah.
And then
which is that racing game? I don't remember if it was Bizarre Creations or not, but it was from that generation where everything had that like neon aesthetic. Was that Blur?
That was Blur. Yeah, Blur is one of my favorite games of all time. It is such a good game. That is the game that killed Bizarre Creations as well.
Yeah, because it was way too good and people didn't understand it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a fantastic game, but Activision sent it out to die, and they did a terrible marketing campaign for it, and then shut down Bizarre Creations almost immediately afterwards. And it was okay then.
Speaking of creative, interesting games that people weren't prepared for that killed prolific developers, you also picked up the Bionic Commando that Grin made, didn't you? Like the last Grin game?
Yes, I haven't tried that yet, but yes, I picked that up as well.
I'm really interested to see what that's like, to hear your feedback on that. Because obviously I didn't play it at the time, too, because I was stupid, and I was just like, oh, everyone says this game's bad, so I'm not going to buy it. But like now, if I can get a copy for $10, I'm going to check it the heck out. Yeah,
exactly. Another thing I want to make some time to do at some point as well is to dip into like the downloadable games from that era as well, because there's a bunch of stuff from like Xbox Live Arcade and stuff that I didn't know existed for quite a while, and obviously hasn't had a limited release or anything like that, and eventually those are going to go away. So
get them on your system now.
Yeah, exactly. Now is the time to take a look at them. Like, I mentioned this to you off mic a little while ago, but did you know that there was like a 2011 reboot of Yar's Revenge that plays like Panzer Dragoon?
I had no idea. Yeah.
So there's that. There's like an open structure 2D platformer, 3D Shadow Complex style game based on Russian Attack as well.
What?
Which I didn't know existed until quite recently.
Did you ever play Marble Blast? Marble Blast 3D Ultra?
Yes, I have played that before. That is a great game.
When I got my new, part of this whole thing is like I actually got like a decent 360, right? Because like my 360 was a launch 360.
Yeah.
So, like, I never wanted to play 360 because it was like, it looked like ass on my 67-inch 4K TV because it didn't have HDMI output. And trying to run the component cables through my FrameMeister didn't really help much. So, like, now I actually have a E-Series 360 with proper HDMI output, proper Wi-Fi, like, just nice and clean and tight and works great. So, like, when I first rebooted it up, the first thing I did was freaking play Marble Blast because it was incredibly addictive. Also, part of me wants to Like, I haven't paid for Xbox Live in a bajillion years, right? Because I don't have Xbox One, and I never used to play my 360. But, like, part of me wants to re-up my Xbox Live subscription just to play the Castlevania online multiplayer game again. I forgot how freaking cool that is.
That's such a cool game. That is a vastly underrated game. Again, a game that came out, people didn't really know what to make of it because this is Castlevania. But I spent so many hours on that game when it first came out. I was like, what is everyone talking about? This game is amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like Castlevania with a loot loop? Okay. Like, yeah. Yeah, so there's a ton. The only thing that's sad is that like creator space is gone. Those weird.
The indie game space. Yeah, there was some fantastic stuff in there. If you downloaded any stuff from there in the past, then it's still in your library. So like I've still got Protect Me Night in there, for example.
Yeah, but that's what I'm lamenting, is that I didn't get Protect Me Night, so I have like no way of getting it now.
Yeah, no, that's never leaving my hard drive ever.
Yeah, no doubt.
Oh, yes. So I suspect we're probably going to have to do a full episode on this side of things at some point. But I mean, we've already talked about a fair amount of stuff there.
I want to do like a whole episode just on weird RPGs that were on the Xbox.
Yeah,
like the Mistwalker stuff, like Infinite Undiscovery, Magna Carta 2. Just like all those weird RPGs that are like stranded on the 360.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure there's like a 360 shoot 'em up episode in us as well at some point as well.
Oh god, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Now I have to start collecting, like, because like the 360's region locking was weird, right? Like the console wasn't region locked, games were specifically. Yes. So like I've got to get like a list of like what cave shoot 'em ups were region locked and what ones weren't.
Yeah,
because there's a ton of amazing stuff. Like I have a Kai Katana on my 360. I have I have Raiden 4 was on the 360, and Raiden Fighters Aces was on the 360. Odomedius Gorgeous, I have that. Yeah. But like I gotta get some of the weird import stuff. Not Trizeal, but the sequel to Trizeal. Wasn't that on like one of those weird packs that you could get on the 360?
Yes, so there was I forget which one it
Delta
was because there were two of those packs. So they were called Shooting Love. One of those is region free and the other one isn't. So you have to be careful which one you get. Let me see if I can find that out for you, because I covered some of these a while back.
Yeah, so I also have to get that pack, that Q Games pack that includes every Extend Extra.
Oh, is there a physical version of that?
There was in the States. I don't know.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like Luminous and every Extend Extra, like on one disc.
I need that, because like every Extend Extra Extreme is one of my favorite Xbox Live Arcade games.
Yeah, it exists. It totally exists. I don't know if it's a region locked cart or not, but it totally exists.
But I need that.
yeah. Every Extend Extra is incredible.
Oh god.
Oh my god, are we 360 fans? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff has come out on PC since then, like
sure.
a lot of shoot 'em ups in particular. But there is still something magical about putting a disc in and being able to play weird Japanese arcade games, like the also on the one of the Zeal collection, Shooting Love 2000X. There's this game called -0 by the same developer. Which is a really abstract shoot 'em up. It's kind of probably best described as a sort of 2D res in a lot of ways, because it's very based on abstract graphics and locking onto enemies.
Oh, I love that.
And sort of the music and sounds gradually expanding as you go through it. So it's very much a sort of 2D res ripoff.
That sounds like my jam.
It's
great.
Sounds
amazing.
It's great. There's so many good things. What else have I got? I've got Espegaluda, Mushihime-sama, Mushi Pork and Pink Sweets.
Was not Mushi Pork was not region locked?
No.
Oh
no.
Man, that's so cool. That game is really cool.
Yeah, so that comes with Pink Sweets as well, so that's a double pack.
Of course.
Eschatos, obviously, one of my favourite shoot 'em ups. That comes with Judgment Silver Sword and card. Actually, that's a double pack as well. That also comes with Ginga Force. Is it Ginga Force? So there's like Eschatos and Ginga Force in one pack. It's a 2-disc pack. So yeah, that's one definitely worth picking up because those are two fantastic shoot 'em ups.
Oh god, what do those go for? Do I even want to look at eBay?
I don't know. I mean, I picked this up about 10 years ago now, and it was sort of reasonably priced then, but yeah, I imagine that's probably shot through the roof now. So
there was a game I tried to look up recently that was like going for stupid money that made me angry. It was the HD remake of the original Fable.
Oh yeah.
Fable Anniversary is going used for like $60.
Oh, that's strange.
I was like, what? It must have been a fairly limited print game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they had a fairly limited. I think it might have been bundled with something, if I remember correctly.
It came out very near the end of the 360's life, so I just don't think there was a lot of copies of it made. But I want that because I love Fable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, anyway, yes, like I say, there's almost certainly several episodes in this for us, but I think for the sake of our own sanity, let's cut that there for now, and we will definitely come back to this topic at some point in the near future. So let's take a short break, and then we'll come back to what is ostensibly our main topic for today. So we'll see you in just a moment.
Production complete. Engaged enemy.
Welcome back. For our third segment today, we've been promising for a while that we wanted to talk about the Evercade handheld from Blaze, which is a system we were both very excited about prior to its release, and it very much lived up to our expectations with its launch lineup of games. So today what we're going to do, we're going to go through the launch lineup of 10 cartridges, and we're just going to pick out some of the stuff that's really stood out to us from these games so far. This won't be like a comprehensive rundown of everything that's available or anything like that, just the stuff that has really kind of caught our attention for one reason or another. So how do you want to do this? You just want to go through each cartridge one at a time, or
yeah, let's just go through each cartridge on the launch lineup, and kind of as we discussed in prior episodes, when we've just kind of mentioned the Evercade in passing, one of the things that's most beautiful about the Evercade is its dedication not only to giving you the games you expect, but for bringing interesting games that you may not have played to the fore in some of its collections.
Yes.
Which includes unreleased stuff.
Yes.
So I kind of just thought this would be a great opportunity not to spend all day talking about Pac-Man and Splatterhouse and Earthworm Jim and all the shit you've played already, but to really just discuss the stuff that you may not have played before. Like, what are some of the new discoveries that the Evercade has allowed you to have that you may not have had the opportunity to have before? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I've been gradually working my way through a lot of this stuff on MoeGamer and writing about them individually, so I've still got a very long way to go before I cover all of these launch games, but I've deliberately been picking the stuff that is a bit less familiar to me to begin with, just because that's the stuff that originally attracted me to this system in the first place, is the fact that this is the first official re-release a lot of this stuff has had. So if we take the first cartridge, for example, the Atari Collection 1 cartridge, this has 20 games on it, including a lot of 2600 games that we've seen on a lot of Atari collections previously. But for me, the really noteworthy thing about this was the fact that there's a bunch of 7800 games on here as well.
Yes.
And these have never been re-released, to my knowledge. I think there was like a 7800 flashback console at one point, but that was a very limited release that no one seems to remember. And so this is sort of probably the highest profile release that a lot of this stuff has had before. But then there's a lot of stuff amongst the 2600 library that's very interesting to explore as well. So taking Atari Collection 1 into account, then what stood out to you in particular from this first batch?
Well, I do need to put a disclaimer down in that I don't love this old stuff as much as you do.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
I understand it as like historically important, but like I just don't have fun with Atari games. Like I just don't. That being said, a lot of the games that I liked on this initial collection are games that I could enjoy from like a historical and a design perspective, where I could see the seeds of other genres like starting to be born, and like that's really important and like curious to me as a historian. So like I'm thinking specifically about like Desert Falcon.
Yep.
Because a lot of these games, you know, we talk about shoot 'em ups a lot on this podcast because we love them so much. But so like. A lot of the games I love the most from like the Atari, specifically, I don't know anything about the 7800, but I had a 2600 growing up, are games that have the proto nuggets of what would become the shoot 'em ups we love today.
Yes.
And I find Desert Falcon specifically curious because it's an isometric shooter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On this extremely limited hardware.
Yeah.
Because like I love, I don't know if you've ever played Viewpoint. It's a Neo Geo game that also got like a 32-bit port on like the PlayStation 1. But,
no,
like,
not familiar.
Shoot 'em ups that have a vertical shoot 'em up feel, but on a isometric plane, are extremely rare, and it's a kind of a subgenre that I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
And Desert Falcon is like probably one of, if not the earliest examples of that. Like I've never played anything older than Desert Falcon that felt like an isometric.
I think Zaxxon predates it.
Okay, I've actually never played Zaxxon.
Oh, have you not? Oh, you should play Zaxxon. Zaxxon is great. Zaxxon was actually pretty early. Desert Falcon, I think, was quite a late 2600 release because it also came out on the 7800, and there was a period of time where Atari would develop stuff primarily for the Atari 7800 and then kind of backport it to the 2600, which obviously was considerably more limited in its capabilities. But there's quite a few games that have both 2600 and 7800 versions, and in fact the 7800 version of Desert Falcon is on the Atari Collection 2 cartridge for Evercade. So if you want to compare the two and see exactly the differences between those two platforms, which are considerable aside from the sound. And one thing I find hilarious about the 7800 is they upgraded the graphics and everything and made it look nice, and it was much more powerful and faster. And then they used the same sound chip that was in the Atari 2600, which is terrible.
Just like beeps and farts.
Yeah. And it's like, this was the platform that was supposed to go up against the NES, and like you think of that and you think, yeah, I'm not surprised that Atari went down the shitter at that point, really. It's like, what is even more hilarious about that is the fact that the Atari 5200, which came out between the 2600 and the 7800, had a better sound chip. It had the sound chip from the Atari 8-bit home computers, which was a really good sound chip. Not quite up to the quality of the Commodore 64 SID chip, but certainly approaching that quality.
You think it was a cost-cutting measure?
Yeah, yes, it absolutely was. Because I don't know how much you know about Atari history, but
just that I don't like Atari.
yeah, fair enough. So the key thing in Atari's history, which most people attribute their fall in the mid '80s to, was, the video game crash of '83 was obviously a big part of this, but one of the most critical things that happened was that in 1984, a guy called Jack Tramiel took over the company. He bought it from Warner, who owned the brand originally. And Jack Tramiel, he used to run Commodore. And he was like a very ruthless businessman who was sort of very much concerned with saving money and cost cutting and so on. So for the majority of 1984, he basically froze every project that Atari was working on to try and figure out what was going to make the most money. So that was what killed the Atari 5200, because he basically thought, well, this isn't going to work. The Atari 7800 was originally supposed to come out several years earlier, but because of Tramiel doing this whole sort of analysis and cost-cutting practice, it ended up coming out way later than it was originally supposed to be.
And it was already out of its element at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where a lot of the problems came from. Atari was like in real turmoil in the mid-80s onwards because of Tramiel and him trying to decide what the priorities were. So he very much wanted to focus on things like the Atari ST, which he was marketing as a competitor to the Macintosh at the time. And indeed, he was doing a good job as a rival to the Macintosh for things like desktop publishing and MIDI and that sort of thing. The Atari ST was doing great. but you just get the impression that he really didn't know what to do with the game side of things, which had been very much been Atari's bread and butter up until that point. And so, yeah, he ended up sort of basically discarding all this goodwill that Atari had built up since 1978. And, yeah, things became a real mess from there.
Oh, it's terrible.
But yeah, that was a digression. But, yeah, I mean, it's relevant to the history side of things here, and also explains the existence of some of these games. So the Atari 2600 stuck around a lot longer than its successors just because it was continued to make money. So many people had bought a 2600 in these early days that there was still a market for games right up until like the late 80s in a lot of cases. And so you would find stuff like Desert Falcon getting ported back from the 7800, and you'd probably find that the 2600 version probably sold better, despite being considerably inferior in terms of technology.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So yeah, the stuff on this collection that has stood out to me in particular, like I say, I've been particularly prioritising looking at the 7800 games because I find these fascinating because I never played on a 7800 either. But I knew some of these games by reputation. Like probably the most legendary of them is Ninja Golf.
Which may be the stupidest video game ever made.
I love it. Ninja Golf is a genuinely very good game still.
Yeah. I never usually stupid is a compliment from me. I used it on Banjo Kazooie in the last segment. Like absolutely. I like things that are stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ninja Golf is stupid, but it knows it's stupid and it embraces it fully, and that's what makes it so good. So, I mean, it is exactly what it says. It's like you get an introduction sequence as the last step of your ninja training is you must complete a deadly round of golf. And, yeah, so you are a ninja. You are on a golf course. You have to hit the ball across the course and get it into the hole. But the twist in this game is that you have to manually run from where you are to where you hit the ball to. And obviously you hit the ball in a straight line, so you can plan out your route on the map, and different types of terrain on the golf course correspond to sort of like different terrains that you'll have to run across, and that will in turn will have different enemies. So if you're running across the fairway, you'll have like ninjas will come chasing you, and there's gophers popping out the ground throwing things at you. But also, like, if you have to run through a water hazard, you end up running underwater and punching sharks in the face and that sort of thing, and it's just brilliant. And then to get the ball in the hole, you have to have a shuriken battle against a dragon that is just protecting the hole. And it's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
It's great. Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah,
and like there's just something so unique aesthetically about the 7800s, like color palette and like resolution. It's like it's very distinct. Like it doesn't look like anything else. Like it's very clear that it's a 7800 game. Yeah, exactly. So, that's a real highlight for me. Another one that I found myself liking a lot was Alien Brigade, which was a light gun shooter. And again, that's another one that sort of embraces its own absurdity. So, like, at first glance, if you didn't know it was called Alien Brigade, you'd think it was an Operation Wolf ripoff. But then, like, an alien just, like, suddenly wanders across in the background or is water skiing or something like that, and you're like, okay. Yeah, I found it hard to get behind what they want you to do in this game, mainly just because of the limitations of the graphical presentation. I, like, had a lot of difficulty distinguishing between, like, the POWs you're not supposed to kill and the aliens and the guys you are supposed to kill. Yeah. But it's super ambitious for its limited hardware. Like, that's a lot of the thing with this stuff is, like, even though I don't have a lot of fun playing it, like, I have fun exploring it because I understand what they were trying to do with the limitations that were placed on them. So I have a lot of respect for what was accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is especially apparent in the Atari stuff because there were the early 2600 stuff in particular. These were developers who were trying to define genres in a lot of cases because a lot of these genres didn't exist. Like you look at stuff like adventure and that sort of thing. The top-down adventure game didn't exist at that point, so this was a brand new thing for them. Some things worked, some things didn't work quite so well, some things got refined in subsequent releases and so on. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why it's fascinating to go back to a lot of these old stuff.
Did you play Gravitar?
Yes, I like Gravitar, but I'm terrible at it.
Yeah, that's Gravitar is one of the examples of exactly what I'm talking about. Like, it's so interesting, but it just like wasn't successful in doing what it wanted to do. It's just like it's too unwieldy. Like your ship has too much momentum. It's like impossible to control. But
I actually like the 2600 version of Gravitar more than the arcade version, because the 2600 version it's still hard, but it's a bit more accessible. The arcade version is regarded as one of the hardest arcade machines ever.
I believe that.
To such a degree that even the original creators couldn't finish it.
That's a problem. But like, yeah, Gravitar's interesting because it creates like a sense of scale to its universe, right? So like, you've got this like space scene you start out in, and it's like an asteroid style. Like the ship is asteroid style. It's like you have a button for gas with momentum.
Yeah.
And then you wheel around, you can shoot, and then you connect with these like icons on the galaxy screen that transports you to a different screen where there's like other challenges.
Yeah.
Like to take out an enemy base or to survive against like fighters that are coming after you. So it's like it creates a sense of scale that you're actually like exploring a galaxy, landing on different planets with different things to do, which is nuts to think about for its age.
Yeah. Super ambitious game for the period, definitely, and especially porting it to 2600 as well. That's quite a remarkable achievement, that one, the 2600 version. All right, shall we move on to Namco?
Yes.
All right, so Namco Museum 1 has a lot of the stuff you might expect, and it's got Pac-Man, it's got Galaxian, it's got Dig Dug, it's got Xevious, but then there's a lot of weird stuff in here as well. So what in particular has jumped out to you on this one? I suspect it's probably the same ones that have jumped out to me, but let's hear it.
Well, I think Libble Rabble needs to be talked about. I know you've written, actually, way before the Evercade, kind of extensively about Libble Rabble and its weirdness.
Yes, the reason for this was that the guy who made Astral Chain on Switch specifically cited Libble Rabble as an inspiration for him for like one of the major mechanics in Astral Chain. So I thought, I've never heard of this. I need to check it out. So I checked out the arcade version and wrote a bit about it, and yeah. So Libble Rabble, if you've not come across it, it's vaguely similar in concept to something like Taito's Kicks, in that you're trying to control areas on screen. But the way you do it is very different to Kicks. It's a very early twin stick game, in that you control two characters on the screen, and you have to sort of wrap this line around sort of pegs on the screen, basically, to create polygon shapes. And it's weird.
Yes, I'm not sure I understand it. But something I often talk about is, like, even for its age, it has a tremendous amount of physicality to it. Like, when you wrap the line around the peg, it feels good. I don't know how else to describe it. There's just that little bit of resistance to it in like the speed of the animation and stuff, where like it really does create the sense that you're wrapping string around a physical object to like draw something.
Yeah,
and I found that fascinating.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting game that is a great example of what we were talking about. That a game that doesn't get acknowledged very often, because I'm not entirely sure which version of the game is on the Evercade, because I'm not even sure that it got any home ports. So it might actually be the arcade version on there.
Yeah, I don't even know how that's possible, right? Because like I thought the Evercade wasn't supposed to have any arcade emulators on it. Like I thought it was only NES, Super Nintendo, and Genesis, and the Atari stuff at this point.
It's honestly hard to determine, because it couldn't have worked on the NES because there's not enough buttons for it.
No, and I think it's Super Nintendo. It's got because
it could be. It could be. But anyway, yeah. So it's regardless. This is a game that doesn't get talked about very often. Like the first I heard of it was when the guy from Astral Chain mentioned it. This was a Namco game I didn't know existed prior to that. So
it is the Super Nintendo version.
Because
the cover art actually features an image of the Super Nintendo controller, like because it looks like the Super Nintendo version looks like it actually came with a pack-in D-pad overlay that you could put over the face buttons.
Yeah,
which makes sense. Sorry to cut you off there. But...
No, that's fine. That's fine. That was pretty much done anyway. So, but yeah, it's a great example of what we're talking about there. So stuff that is from a company that we're all familiar with, Namco, but it's a game that no one talks about, which is fantastic and a big attraction of the Evercade for me. Mm-hmm. Which also brings me to Starluster.
Yeah, you love Starluster.
So Starluster is basically Namco's take on Atari's Star Raiders. Mechanically and structurally, it's pretty much identical to Star Raiders. So if you've not come across that before, what you have is a two-dimensional galaxy map, grid-based, which has various bases and planets and stuff scattered around it. And your job is to eliminate the enemy presence from that map. And as you're doing stuff, the enemy fleets are moving around on the map every so often, and they will go and attack the bases and the planets and so on. And so in order to get the best possible score at the end of the game, you need to defeat them as efficiently as possible while trying not to let any of the bases or planets get damaged or destroyed. But yeah, this is another one of those games that I didn't know existed at this point. It's a first-person space sim for the NES, basically. I mean, it's pretty simple in terms of mechanics and control and that sort of thing, but there's just something about it. It's very immersive, and again, there's a really good sense of physicality to this through things like the way the cockpit moves up and down as you're pitching and rolling your spacecraft in that game.
I was super impressed by that.
Yeah, and it's the other interesting thing about this game is that its difficulty levels aren't just difficulty; they actually up the complexity of the game as well. So, like, if you play on the easiest difficulty level, you have, like, I think a couple of bases to defend. If you play on the middle one, there's a lot more in the way of bases to defend, and there's more mechanics to worry about. So you can do things like you can dock with the bases to get various power-ups and stuff, and so you need to manage your time a bit more effectively so that you can go and pick up these power-ups while still defending everything. And then the hardest difficulty, there's this whole hidden subquest for you to find these keys that are hidden on the various planets, and then use those to track down the true final boss of the game, who is literally a pixel in size on the galaxy map, and then go and fight them off. And so there's so much depth to this game that might not be immediately apparent, but it's fantastic. It's a really satisfying and enjoyable game that has been such a pleasure to discover. Yeah. Just it's been a real eye-opener to me to see how ambitious some of these games are. Like, I just keep saying the same thing over and over again, but like I had no idea, like when I was a Nintendo kid, like games like this were too complicated for me, right? Yeah. So like as an adult, rediscovering games that were clearly for these older consoles for adults that I couldn't play when they were current. Yeah. Right? Like I never would have appreciated a game like this because I couldn't when I was 5, right? Like now I can, and I can understand this like whole other realm for these older consoles. And like I have the Evercade to thank for that, because I never would have like investigated Starluster. Like it never would have occurred to me. Yeah, exactly. All right, any more Namco stuff you want to highlight before we move on? I mean, it's cool that Mappy Kids is on this, because that's never been released in English before. But like I also don't actually think the game is very good. So I don't know how much lip service it gets a side scroller. It's a fairly competent side scroller where you collect money to try to build a house for your girlfriend, and then at the end of every stage, all your money gets taken away by frustrating mini games, so you can never get anywhere in it. Like is that an accurate description of Mappy Kids? Pretty much. Yeah. Okay, moving on to Data East then. So what's jumped out at you from the Data East collection?
Midnight Resistance makes me a very happy man. I had no idea that Data East made a 16-bit super janky Contra clone. But like everything about it makes me happy. Like the first level opens up. The music is incredible. You're standing on the hood of a Jeep that's being driven by your partner with beautiful 80s long blonde hair, like, blowing in the wind while you're just, like, machine gunning dudes to death. And, like, it's got a little bit of, like, Sonic the Hedgehog in it. Because you collect these keys, and you have to try to get as many keys as possible to the end of each stage, because that's where you purchase ammo and power-ups.
Yeah.
Is this, like, shop at the end of each stage, and the items are behind glass cases that you need keys to unlock, and when you get hit, you drop your keys, like Sonic and the Rings. So, it's just, I don't know, it's curious attempt to have a Me Too Contra, and I really like it, and it's weird, and some of the levels have really interesting instances of vertical scrolling, which is something later Contra games did as well, but I really always enjoy that in a game. It's cool. I don't know. How about you? What did you enjoy on this collection?
I'm a big fan of Burnin Rubber.
Yes, me too! I've played that for hours since I got this.
Yeah, but Burnin Rubber is great. Again, this is one that's got a very interesting and convoluted story behind it. So this game has 3 names, depending on which version you're familiar with. So it was known as Burnin Rubber in the arcades, and then its home ports were either known as Bump and Jump or Buggy Popper.
Buggy Popper! Yeah. What a great name.
And so the version of Burnin Rubber that is on the Evercade is a port of the NES version, which was done by Victor Kai and then published by Data East. It's technically the sequel to the arcade game because it's quite different in a lot of ways. You see, the original Burnin Rubber was a relatively straightforward racing game with the twist that you could jump over things. In the arcade original, it was dependent on you going fast enough, but in the NES version, you've got like fuel and stuff to worry about as well. But it's basically a vertical scrolling racing game in a similar kind of fashion to Spy Hunter. It actually predates Spy Hunter by a year. So there's no shooting in it though, so all of the combat in it is either ramming stuff off the road or using this jumping mechanic to land on things. And it's one of those games that's just incredibly simple but super, super addictive.
Yes.
Just because it's really easy to learn. All you need is left, right, up, down, and the jump button. That's all you need. It's intuitive to understand. You just dodge stuff, but it's challenging in such a way that you can get just a little bit further each time. But it still slaps you about a bit every so often, but not so much to be demoralizing. It's just really nicely paced and balanced.
There's a really satisfying learning curve because the trajectory of the jump is unique.
Yes,
like it takes a minute to get used to understanding the velocity and the trajectory of the jump. But once you get used to it, like mastering it and like landing on a guy and taking him out is like so delightful.
Yes. And there's sort of like there's a score-based incentive to really figure out the timing of that as well, because any of the big jumps that you have to do in order to survive, like jumping over a river or something like that, there's always something tiny halfway through that jump that you can land on for loads of bonus points.
Yes.
So like in the second stages for the city levels, you run into these huge viaducts every so often that you need to jump over. But if you time your jump perfectly so that you land on top of this viaduct and then immediately jump off it, you'll get a whole huge point bonus as well. And then there's other stuff like you get a huge point bonus for not destroying any vehicles on a level, for example. So if you want the highest scores, you have to actually not destroy anything, which is surprisingly difficult to do.
Yes, yeah, because the enemies are aggressive.
Yeah, so that's a real highlight for me. That again, that's another one that I'm not really familiar with from beforehand. So this was a really nice discovery for me. You sound like you were a bit more familiar with it from when it previously came out.
I had played it in like previous, like the arcade version, like on like Game and stuff. But like I never really dug into it as deeply as like I got addicted to it on the Evercade. Like I ran my battery out playing it. Like it is so much fun.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorites from like the whole launch lineup. I think it's one that I keep coming back to, certainly.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, any more Data stuff for you?
I mean, there's a lot of bangers on this cartridge, but a lot of these are games people know already. Like, Joe and Mac is popular. Like, it's awesome that Joe and Mac is on here, but people know Joe and Mac. Obviously, Magical Drop. But, like, it's nice to have a cool handheld pool game with Side Pocket. Like, that's really fun. But yeah, I think Burnin' Rubber is the breakaway star from this collection for sure. Yeah, aside from the stuff I respect. I already knew.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to Interplay then. What have we got here?
Hard pass. Titan's cool, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I only have the Interplay carts because I want the full collection for the Evercade. There's a couple more interesting games on the second one, but like I largely think Interplay games are rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have a lot of nice things to say about any of the games on this collection.
Yeah, I mean these are interesting curiosities. Again, these are ones that don't get talked about that much for various reasons. In this case, a lot of these Interplay stuff is actually by Titus rather than by Interplay. Interplay picked up Titus's IPs when Titus went bust. There was a whole sort of back and forth between those two companies. I think Titus actually owned Interplay at one point, and then Titus went bust, but Interplay survived. So Interplay picked up all of Titus's properties after that, which is why they're all on this one. I found Incantation quite interesting. Not necessarily good, but interesting.
It's beautiful. The pixel
Incantation is a beautiful looking game. It doesn't play brilliantly, but it's a lovely looking platform game. As far as I can make out, it's also one of the rarest SNES games as well. So
I believe that.
Again, this is one of those games that it's just cool to be able to have easy access to. And like you say, Titan is a really interesting idea that doesn't quite work.
Yeah,
it almost works, but it just doesn't quite work. Titan is basically a take on Breakout, but combined with a top-down map-based arcade adventure, in which you have to move around and bounce the ball around and break all the blocks and stuff. But you're doing that in scrolling mazes, which is cool in principle. Execution doesn't work quite so well, just because you can't really see quite enough on screen, I think is the main problem. You can't see far enough ahead of you, which makes it quite difficult to sort of plan out some of the more complex rebounding shots that you need to do in some of the later levels. But it's a cool idea, and it's an example of a developer being pretty experimental at that time. So it's worth trying, even if you don't spend a ton of time with it. Like you say, the Interplay collections are probably my least favourite ones as well, but there is some worthwhile stuff in there as well, like the Earthworm Jim games in particular. But those are ones that everyone knows are worth playing at this point. But the other stuff on these...
So, let me just say, broadly speaking, my biggest issue with Interplay's entire catalog is Interplay often committed in their games what I consider to be the greatest sin of the 2D era. They took so much time to make beautiful animations that they forgot that extended animations create delayed reaction times and make your games play like ass. Yeah. So Earthworm Jim is a visual masterpiece. Nothing compares to the visuals of Earthworm Jim from the 16-bit era. They're amazing. The animation, the frames of animation, the character sprites, size and detail, almost unparalleled. But they're not actually fun to play, because every single movement is too many frames of animation. The hit detection, super dodgy. It's just not a good game.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. All right.
I mean, they are worth playing to understand that. This is how you don't make a side scroller. but there's no joy for me in Earthworm Jim. The cartoon is great. If you ever have a chance to watch the cartoon, 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's move on to the second Atari collection then. So just for some more stuff you don't like.
Yeah, well, there's some more stuff on this that I do like.
Yes. Okay. So what are some highlights for you from this one then?
Well, specifically, more attuned to what we were talking about with the first collection, in that I never played any 7800 games in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, as a kid, I was addicted to Asteroids.
Yes.
So the 7800 version of Asteroids that's on this is amazing.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah. Superb. I actually like it more than the arcade version.
Also, Planet Smashers as an early horizontal shoot 'em up is fantastic. A fantastic curiosity.
Yeah.
Also, it's called Planet Smashers, which I think is awesome.
Yes. Yes, that is cool.
I mean, there's stuff on here. There's more stuff on this collection that I actually owned as a child on my 2600.
Yeah.
Like, I had Haunted House, I had Air Sea Battle, I had Bowling, I had Street Racer, I had Centipede. So, yeah, there's cool, like, Human Cannonball. I mean, you play Human Cannonball. It's basically like Proto-Worms, right? Like, for
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Human Cannonball is one of the... Because I covered that on Atari A to Z a couple of weeks back, and I was surprised how much I ended up actually liking that, because I was sort of dreading covering it, because I was like, this is a really simple game, it's going to be quite dull. But I was actually surprised what an interesting sort of proto-physics puzzle it ended up being. I mean, it's very limited, obviously, but yeah, it's for the time, it was an ambitious experiment, certainly.
Anything on that cart that was particular to you?
I think the main one that has really struck me on this one is Solaris. Have you played that at all?
I mean, like, I booted it up and fiddled with it, but, like, not enough to really get a deep understanding of it.
Yeah, Solaris is one you need to put a bit of time into. Solaris is the... technically, it's the sequel to Star Raiders. There is a Star Raiders 2, but Solaris is technically the official sequel to Star Raiders. What Solaris is a bit like in Star Raiders, you have this sort of grid-based map with enemy forces moving around it and planets to defend and so on. But they've really emphasized the sort of space adventure aspect of it. And so rather than just dealing with one large sector map, what you do is you move from screen to screen on these maps in a sort of adventure game style. But you also have these third-person into the screen space shooting segments as well. And so you will have to take down enemy fleets, and you'll descend onto planets and take out ground targets, and you'll have to defend your planets from enemies on there and dock with things to refuel. And your eventual aim in the game is to explore all these sectors and find this planet called Solaris. And so there's a long-term goal in there, which is quite unusual for a 2600 game. A lot of 2600 games were purely score-based, and you just play forever. But this had a definite end goal that you could reach. But again, it's one of those games that was very ambitious and actually managed to pull it off, which is really impressive considering the hardware it was running on. So this is probably one of the most technically impressive Atari 2600 games, because it's got a lot of colours, it's got some nice graphical effects, and it's a big game that is slightly different each time you play. So even if you've finished this game once, there's plenty of incentive to replay for higher scores, or to try and find Solaris a bit more quickly, or to experiment with different routes you can take and that sort of thing. And it's just a fantastically interesting and ambitious game that actually manages to live up to its potential. And so this is another one I've spent quite a lot of time with, just because it's a fascinating curiosity, and it's fascinating to see a game that actually manages to achieve what it set out to do from this period.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely dive deeper into that.
For sure. All right, moving on to Namco Museum 2 then. So again, we've got some stuff that you kind of expect to see on this one, but for me, this Namco Museum 2 is the emphasis is very much on slightly lesser known games in here. So you got Gallagher on here, that's probably the most well known one. You got Tower of Druaga, but then you got all sorts of other lesser known weird stuff on here. Like you got Pac-Attack, which you probably want to talk about. You got Dig Dug 2, Burning Force, Warpman, Splatterhouse 2 and 3. So where do you want to start with this one?
Like, this is the cart, man. Like this might be my favorite cart of the launch lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, like, where to even begin? Phelios, an amazing vertical shoot 'em up. I think it's the Mega Drive version of Phelios.
Yes.
I'm also biased because this collection contains one of my all-time favorite games ever, which is Burning Force.
Yep.
Burning Force is something I've screamed about on this podcast whenever possible. It is essentially a vertical shoot 'em up that's smashed and extrapolated to a third-person viewpoint. And I can't get enough of it. The music, the visual presentation, to this day, I'm
the pink
obsessed
leotard.
with it. The pink leotard, yeah. The fact that the third act of every level transitions from a hover bike game to a Star Fox style plane sim, just it's so good. Splatterhouse 3 is it really interesting, and I think it's the black sheep of the Splatterhouse series, in that the Splatterhouse 1 and 2 are specifically side-scrolling beat-em-ups with no belt scrolling, right? No up and down into the foreground. And away from the foreground. Splatterhouse 3 is a more traditional beat-em-up game, but it adds something that no other beat-em-up, I think, really has. I guess, in retrospect, River City Ransom and some of the Technos games have it, but you're exploring a haunted house, so you're actually transitioning in between rooms, trying to find the exit. It's not just a point A to point B, it's a maze that you're exploring, and in each room you're fighting in a traditional belt-scrolling beat-em-up style, but every episode is on a timer.
Yeah.
So, you have an end goal of, rescuing your girlfriend who's trapped in the mansion, and the ending you get is based on how well you perform. So, there's a heavy emphasis on replay, right? Because you've got to memorize the layout of the mansion to get the best times.
Yeah.
That's a really cool game. And, of course, Dig Dug 2, which I feel like we've both become enamored with.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, so Dig Dug 2, if you've not come across it before, is completely different to Dig Dug 1 in that rather than sort of digging down into the dirt, you have a top-down map view and you're digging with a pneumatic drill type thing and making cracks in the ground and eventually cutting off pieces of land. And so your replacement for dropping rocks on things in Dig Dug 2 is cutting off pieces of land with enemies on it.
Sending them crumbling into the sea.
Yeah.
To a briny death.
It's incredibly satisfying. Such a fun game. And one that no one talks about. I don't know why, because it's great.
I never even heard of it until I...
Yeah. Did you know there is a Dig Dug game on, I think it's Nintendo DS, or possibly 3DS, that combines Dig Dug and Dig Dug 2 into one game? As in you're playing Dig Dug 2 on the top screen and Dig Dug on the bottom screen at the same time.
What?
You need to check that out. I've been rewatching some old classic Game Room videos recently, and he happened to cover it, and I was like, I need this game.
Yeah, that sounds like my brain wouldn't be able to handle it. I was like preface, I'm terrible at Dig Dug. There's just something about it that my brain can't comprehend. So
yeah.
I'm definitely better at Dig Dug 2 than I am at Dig Dug 1. There's just something about the specific rhythm and timing of the original Dig Dug that's not compatible with me. But
yeah, I got quite good at it at one point. But I have to stay in practice. The DS one's called Dig Dug Digging Strike. It came out in 2005. But yeah, fascinating game. Because, like I say, it is basically just Dig Dug and Dig Dug 2 at the same time. Bizarre.
So it's eShop?
No, it had a package release.
What? I was going to say, because the eShop for the original DS is dead, right? You can't get anything anymore. Which sucks, because I missed Box Life, which I've always wanted to. Yeah, I'd never heard of that before.
Yeah.
I'll definitely look into that. But yeah, this Namco collection too is just every game on it's good. Pac-Attack, a Pac-Man puzzle game that actually has Pac-Man mechanics in the puzzle game. Like you use the blocks to construct the maze that directs Pac-Man to eat the ghost pieces. Like what? It's so high concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, like we keep saying, one that not a lot of people talk about. It's like everyone focuses on like the mainline Pac-Man games, and spin-offs like this often just don't get the attention they deserve. But again, this collection gives you the opportunity to try it out for yourself, which is cool.
Yeah, for a low barrier of entry. That's like the other important thing to really talk about with the Evercade, right? Is just like, not only is it these curiosities and games you've probably never played, but it's games you would never think about playing at like a full price, high cost of entry barrier.
Yes.
But at $20 a cartridge, or whatever the Euro equivalent ends up being, for 10, 15 games, like, this just becomes an inexpensive way to have these experiences and own them if you're an archivist. Yeah,
exactly. And the fact that the console itself is not expensive in the first place either.
Well, it's like it's like $100 for the console and three of the launch game packs. Like, I've been selling people on this thing like gangbusters.
Yeah.
You know, like, I have a friend who drives truck. So, like, I introduced him to him, and, like, he was like, I've been hesitant to buy handheld consoles because, like, the games are expensive, the console's expensive, and I don't really care that much about newer games. Yeah. But, like, if this is $100 and I can play Pac-Man and Dig Dug whenever I want while I'm on the road, like, this is an incredible idea.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. What else on here? Warpman. I should probably mention Warpman, because I like Warpman a lot. Warpman is yet another one I'd never heard of. I didn't know existed. Warpman is a sequel to an arcade game that was called Warp and Warp that came out in 1981. That I'd also never heard of. And it's basically it's an arena shooter for half of it, and then the other half is Bomberman.
Yep.
And it was Bomberman before Bomberman as well, which is quite interesting. So in Warpman, you start by wandering around in space shooting enemies, and when you collect a power-up, you can jump into a black hole in the middle of the screen, and then it becomes a maze-based shooter. But the core mechanics in that are you drop bombs, and they fire out energy blasts down the corridors that you're walking down. And it's a very early take on what Hudson would later do with Bomberman. And then it goes off in its own direction after that, so Hudson didn't completely rip this off to make Bomberman. They both do their own distinct thing, but this is another one of those games that is just so simple to understand to begin with, but so monstrously addictive. I've spent a lot of time playing this game.
all the best of these classic arcade games are like that, like simplistic concepts with the desire to score chase and perfect your abilities being the core gameplay. It's great.
Yeah. All right, should we get the Interplay Collection 2 out of the way?
to be fair, Interplay Collection 2 is a much better set than Interplay Collection 1.
Yes.
I enjoy both Claymates and Prehistoric Man quite a bit.
Yep. Yeah, both of those are solid platformers.
I also like Brainies in concept.
Uh-huh.
But I find the fact that it's timed so tightly... it's not fun because of how strict the time limits on the stages are.
Yes.
But the puzzle game, the core puzzle game of it is solid. It's just, I don't have fun playing it because I'm stressed out by it.
Yeah. I mean, Brainies, I think the time limits are much too harsh on that, because the time is ticking away while you're sort of while you're reviewing the map of the level at the start of it as well. So
if the timer was paused,
you have hardly any time to plan out what you want to do in that level, and then you have to do it quickly and perfectly. And it's that's a real problem for that kind of game. You need that thinking time, particularly in some of the later stages. That's it. To be fair, as the game gets more complicated, it does get a lot more generous with the time limits. But I can see, I mean, obviously you're one of those people, but I can see a lot of people getting put off by quite how tight the time limits are on those early stages, and assuming the whole game is going to be like that, and then thinking, "Oh, sod this! I'm not gonna waste my time with this."
I don't like when games stress me out, and that's been my whole life. Like I don't like games with time limits.
Yeah.
It's not a knock against the games from a design perspective. Like, I respect Atelier, but like, there's something in my brain, in my personal psyche, that wraps around the notion of a time limit, and it gets stressed out by it.
Yeah.
Like, it's part of who I am.
You're not the only one who feels like that. I've spoken to quite a few people who feel that way about games with timers in various forms. So, like, I know some people who otherwise like the idea of something like Trauma Center, for example, but the fact the operations in that are timed, they can't play it.
Yep, same here.
Yeah, so yeah, you're not alone on that one by any means. And the brain is it kind of front loads it with some really harsh time challenges, and I think that really hurts the game in the long run. But I mean, you could look up passwords and skip straight to the later levels, of course, as well. You could always try doing that. But yeah, anyway. From this collection, I found Red Gravity quite interesting.
Yes, that's really interesting.
Again, not certain if it's good or not, but I find
it's
an interesting and ambitious game, certainly. This is also another one that's sort of interesting from a long-term historical perspective, in that it's one of the first games by Brian Fargo, who would go on to do like Wasteland and Fallout and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So Red Gravity, if you've not come across it before, is it's a side-scrolling adventure game, basically, where you go to different planets, you do platforming, you find items and weapons and things, and there's actually a vague sense of unfolding narrative as you go through it as well, which is one of the reasons it's quite noteworthy. There's actually a sense of context to a lot of your actions. I mean, it's kind of undermined considerably by the fact that there's no punctuation in the entire game. But yeah, in terms of concept, this is a really interesting game that it is worth trying out. There are a lot of questionable execution aspects of this game, like there's blind jumps and blind falls and hidden stuff that doesn't even give you any vague clues that there's something hidden there and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting curiosity that is definitely worth checking out. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Interplay Collection 2 at the minute, because those are the two games that I've really spent time with.
Sure.
On to MegaCat then. So MegaCat Studios are a company who they work with modern developers for classic systems. So people who are making new games for the NES and the Mega Drive and that sort of thing. And sort of their bread and butter up until now has been doing actual sort of physical releases of these games that developers have otherwise released for freeware on their sites. They've released them as free ROM downloads that you can play in an emulator. And MegaCat has done a lot of releases of these on proper NES cartridges with manuals and packaging and that sort of thing. And this collection is a lot of their stuff that has previously been available through their website or via the original developers' stuff. These are interesting games, I think, because there's a mix of stuff that is obviously very short form and experimental, and something that I would probably balk at paying $50 for an NES cartridge of, given that you can finish it in 15 minutes.
Sure.
But having them all in one collection allows you to really sort of appreciate the experimentation that's going on here and the different homages to different styles of game that they've been going through and that kind of thing. So what stood out for you amongst this lot?
Multitude?
Yes.
Is really great. It's a great little puzzler where you are presented with a single screen puzzle and these cute little robots that each have like different abilities. One can drop through floors, or one can float, or one can walk, and you have to just solve these puzzles using these little robots. And I love kind of single screen puzzle games like this.
Yeah, I am quite a fan of Multitude. This is one of those ones that you can finish in about 15 minutes if you know what you're doing. But while it lasts, there's some really interesting, cool puzzles in there. There's a couple of sequences in the game where I don't think the game quite gives you enough information to let you know that something is possible. So there was one level in this game that I got completely stuck on because I didn't know that the characters could climb up each other. But as soon as you figure that out, it becomes a lot more straightforward. But yeah, there's some really cool puzzles in this. It's presented quite nicely. This actually has its origins. They developed it as a ZX Spectrum game first and then ported it to NES.
Cool.
So there is a Spectrum version out there that you can play in an emulator or a real Spectrum as well. So that's worth looking at because it's slightly different to the version we've got on here. Anything else from here?
I mean, to be fair, everything on this card is what we're talking about, right? Because it's all weird stuff that we never would have. Obviously, Tanzer is like banging. That's great. That's probably, from a pure design and gameplay perspective, like probably the best game on this cart in terms of like it plays the best. It feels like a professional product. Like it's so it's just like this really hectic side scroller with kind of shooter elements, and I don't want to say roguelike DNA because the stages are randomly generated, but like it feels very roguelike because your character is extremely fragile and there's branching paths, and like the emphasis is on repeated runs, right? Like dying and then starting all over again, trying a different path, trying a different power-up set. It's like there's an emphasis on like repeated play, which is very satisfying for like a short-form game like this. Because you know, games like this, and really the Evercade in general for me, is like the Evercade is something I fire up before work when I have 15 minutes to kill. So like games like Tanzer and Multitude are perfect for sessions like that.
I'd agree with that. And most of the games on the Mega Cat Studios collection are designed in that way. So like Old Towers is a nice puzzle. It uses a similar kind of mechanic to the Brainies, actually. So you push in a direction, you keep moving until you hit something, and in that one you're trying to sort of collect everything on the screen rather than end up in a specific location. So
that game is great.
So if you enjoyed the Brainies, that's one worth checking out. There's some interesting sort of twists on sort of established other retro games as well. Like this is like Creepy Brawlers is like a horror themed Punch Out, which is quite interesting. There's Coffee Crisis, which is quite a well-regarded beat-em-up from a while back. I haven't actually tried that myself yet, but I know that a fair few people had nice things to say about that when it first came out. This is a really good cartridge if you like interesting and experimental games that aren't necessarily going to last you a long time, but which are interesting technical achievements in some cases, and are in other cases quite bold experiments in design for these retro platforms as well. So yeah, this is definitely an interesting collection of games to explore. Okay, moving on. The next cart in the list then is Pico Interactive, which is one of definitely the coolest cartridges in this collection. One of the best value ones. There's like 20 games in here. It also has to be said, this is the one that is fraught with the most problems as well. So they've had a real nightmare getting some of these games working properly. And at the time of recording, there are still a few bugs in some of the games on here. But all credit to the Evercade team. They are making a real effort to do firmware updates to fix a lot of the problems that people have been encountering. They've already fixed the crash problem that people were having with the RPG Brave Battle Saga. They're working on fixing an issue that Top Racer has with nitro sticking and that sort of thing. So if things don't work perfectly now, then just keep an eye on Evercade's social media and stuff, and they will let you know when they've sorted stuff out. They are aware of the problems, and they are being really good about fixing them. So
is that all getting addressed through the firmware updates on the console? Is that how they're handling that?
Yeah, so what happens is you do a firmware update on the console, and I think it writes something to the cartridge when you next put the cartridge in.
Oh, that's
so
really smart.
It fixes the game, because the carts are all flash memory, so they're rewritable. Yeah, they can basically patch the games through firmware updates. I don't know the mechanics of how it all works, but yeah, they have patched several games already in that way. So, all right. So, disclaimer aside, what has jumped out at you from the Pico collection so far?
This one could merit its own episode.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, games that I've actually played with some time. I did actually put some time into Brave Battle Saga, but I think it's more just interesting than it is good, in that it's like a it's like a Taiwanese 16-bit RPG, but it's not particularly good. I thought Tin Head was great. Did you play Tin Head?
I haven't tried that one yet, actually, but yeah. So what's the deal with that one?
Tin Head is like this side scroller in like very much what I would call like the Euro fashion, so like big stages that are kind of explorable, just really pretty sprite work, and you're this robot and you adjust like the the angle of your shots to either be like upward trajectory, downward trajectory, or straight on. You have like a button to switch that, so like that kind of affects the way you navigate the stages. Kind of like trying to take out enemies before you get to the platform they're on by like changing like to an upward trajectory. It just has a very like high production value feel to it, like loads of animation and like really colorful and detailed backgrounds.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the RPGs and stuff on this collection, I just haven't had a lot of the time to dig into them that I've wanted to.
Yeah.
But one of the things that makes this collection so interesting is some of these games are Taiwanese.
Yes.
And have never really been available to English-speaking audiences before. So stuff like Brave Battle Saga, Water Margin, Canon, Legend of the New Gods, I believe.
Yeah.
And which is Canon the Shining Force ripoff? Which one is the Shining Force ripoff? That's
I forget.
Yeah, that's Canon. That's I think Canon. But yeah, like a lot of these games are Taiwanese attempts at kind of recreating classics of the 16-bit era for that market. So to be able to play these as someone who appreciates game history and development history is just really interesting. It's like they're not particularly good, but they're just interesting from a historical perspective. Like like Water Margin's a Streets of Rage style beat 'em up based on like a Romance of the Three Kingdoms era Chinese history setting, and like the hit detection's really dodgy and it's like kind of glitchy, but it's just fascinating to play.
Yeah.
And like I know, like I just like ripped up Interplay games for the same exact thing, but now I'm like, this is worth playing because it's from Taiwan. But like, it is because like, how often do you get to play a game that was like landlocked in Taiwan for 30 years? But now you get to play it. Like it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's some other interesting stuff that Pico have done. Is take games that were maybe confined to home computer platforms, and people have done console ports of them, which in turn makes them a bit more accessible and easy to emulate for a lot of people, because setting up computer emulators can be a bit trickier than setting up console emulators. And so a good example of that is Switchblade, which is a very early core design game that originally came out for Atari ST. Is probably best known in its Atari ST incarnation, but a few years back someone ported it to Mega Drive, and Pico published that and did a full release of it with the full support of the original author Simon Phipps, who did some exclusive cover art for it and everything. It's like a lovely painted cover art that he did for it. And this Mega Drive version is the one that we've got on this Pico Interactive collection. And Switchblade is a open structure 2D platformer from sort of the very early days of that style of gameplay, and it's got some interesting and unusual mechanics, such as the way you attack by holding down the fire button to set how powerful your attack is, and that also corresponds to what move you do if you're doing hand-to-hand combat and so on. So it takes a bit of getting used to, but then as you play it, you start to realise that the game is designed around that system, and so it's not like a super fast action game or anything like that. You can take your time over getting into the right position and charging up your attacks and so on, and you've got this absolutely huge map to explore that is... It's massive, but it's not daunting because it's structured really nicely. It's designed in such a way that it will kind of naturally lead you around itself in certain routes, but it's still open to you backtracking and exploring and trying to find hidden pathways and so on. It's a game that I didn't play the original Switchblade on the Atari ST back in the day. I played its sequel a fair bit, which is a little more sort of linearly structured. But yeah, I can see why this was quite a popular and well-received game back in the day, because it's another one that's ambitious for the time, and for the most part, I think it succeeds in what it's doing quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely experimented with it a little bit. I certainly found the uniqueness of the combat off-putting, not in such a way that I wouldn't return to it again, but in a way such as, like, I probably need to read a little bit about how I'm supposed to be doing this and then try it again kind of way.
Yeah, but there is a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, but it's curious in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another noteworthy one in there. I mean, this is a fairly well-known one at this point, I think, but it's I do want to give a bit of an acknowledgement to the Immortal as well.
Yes. We've mentioned my love of the Immortal on this podcast before.
Yeah.
Specifically in our gory games Halloween episode.
Yes. I mean, in a lot of ways, as a game, the Immortal is absolute bullshit because it's unfair, it's mean, it doesn't tell you things that you need to know, and it just kills you for no reason over and over again. But there's something about it that is just it's well worth spending time with. It's got a unique atmosphere all of its own. It's quite noteworthy, and it's a game from that era that's actually got some quite nice writing in it as well.
Yeah,
because it's quite unusual to see like prose and dialogue in a lot of games from this era that aren't explicitly RPGs. But the Immortal's got some like really evocative prose in it as well to describe things like the dreams your character has and the things that you come across in your explorations and so on. And then there's the ridiculously gory aspect as well in all the combat.
I just remember as a child being afraid of this game.
Yeah.
Like it's not overtly scary in like a horror sense, but there's like a certain oppressiveness to its atmosphere and sound design and visuals. Yeah. It's very much like one wonders if like the Dark Souls people played Immortal. Like it's got that kind of feel. It's like this dark fantasy where like everything just feels like it's too much, too oppressive.
Yeah. It is that knowledge that the game could kill you at any moment and probably will kill you at any moment.
Yes.
Because there are you walk into a new room in the Immortal and you don't know what to expect. You don't know if there's going to be a pit trap there or if there's going to be like a huge worm is going to jump out of the floor and eat you. The only time you really get a sort of warning of that is like in the first room, where if you stand still for too long, you get a little message on the screen saying you might want to move, and then if you don't, you get eaten by a giant worm.
Yeah.
But yes, that is a fun one to explore and revisit, even if it is a absolute nightmare to get through. But yeah, it's satisfying when you do manage to solve a level though, and it's relatively short as well. So if you can get your head around the mechanics and know what to look for, and you're willing to put some time into it, it shouldn't take you too long to get all the way through, and it's an experience worth having for sure.
And like, name another game where you get to play as a wizard and just tap an enemy on the head with your wand and then they explode.
It does make you wonder why he doesn't just do that at the start of any fight though.
Yeah, oink, done. Oink, done. Like, yeah, to everything.
Oh dear. Anyway, yes. Anything else from Pico you want to bring up now, or do you want to save it for a dedicated Pico episode?
Yeah, it might be worth it to do like a dedicated Pico episode later down the line, specifically as far as the RPGs go.
Sure.
Stuff like Dragon View and Draken are so curious that they almost demand being dissected with a lot more scrutiny.
Yeah, a lot of people really, really genuinely like Dragon View from the sound of things. Like just talking to people in the Evercade Discord, as like Draken has lots of its own issues, but like Dragon View, people seem to really genuinely be enjoying. So
yeah, no, Dragon's a mess, an ambitious mess, but Dragon View is genuinely cool. It's a cool game.
All right, let's move on then to the Technos Collection, which is the last of the launch lineup then. So this is your Double Dragon games, your River City Ransom, your Super Dodgeball, and your Renegade, and that sort of thing. So most of these games are pretty well known, I'd say. But which ones in particular have caught your attention so far?
Yeah, this is really the only collection that didn't have anything weird on it, right? Like these are all fairly expected games. But I had never played Super Double Dragon before.
Yeah.
So I was really grateful for that opportunity. But like, I don't really have much to say about it because like, what can be said about Double Dragon that hasn't been said into the ground? Like, yes, Technos invented and perfected the beat 'em up genre as we know it. Super Double Dragon is just a very good example of a 16-bit beat 'em up. It's competently made, beautiful sprite work, great sound design, satisfying hit detection. Like, it's great.
Yeah. I think, for me, the thing worth mentioning about this collection is that, much like the Kunio-kun collection they did a while back, they've deliberately gone for the console releases of the early Double Dragon games rather than the arcade ones. And the NES versions of those two Double Dragon games in particular are very interesting because they're not straight ports of the arcade machine.
Right.
Like the first Double Dragon, for example, has an early example of a leveling system where as you fight through the game, you unlock new moves by leveling up your character, and there's platforming bits that don't really work. And
those goddamn conveyor belts.
Oh god, yeah. And one thing I've discovered the distinct joy of since starting to cover some of these things is Technos sprites on the NES in a damaged state. Because all they seem to do for them is they just basically take the existing sprite and then they just seem to sort of scrunch it up.
Yeah.
And it just makes for these fantastically expressive sprites that just look absolutely ridiculous. And you just don't notice them during the game, but like you do a freeze frame of you punching someone in the face in Renegade and something, and you're like, what is that?
Yeah, it's just like their face like sucks in on itself. No. Nobody loves punching things in the face more than Technos. Like, they have perfected the face punch. But it's like, even like, one of the things we talked about when we did our beat 'em up episodes is how integral sound design and hit detection are to beat 'em ups. And how, like, if you make a beat 'em up and it doesn't feel good to punch something, then you've made a bad beat 'em up.
Yes.
And like even going as far back as Double Dragon 1, just like the feeling of connecting that punch is great. Like, it's so good. It's so good. It's meaty and like satisfying. Like, these guys are the best. They're the best of the best at this. And like, obviously Super Dodgeball. My god. Let's fuse beat 'em up sensibilities with a competitive sports title. Yes, please. Make dodgeball fun again.
All right, good stuff. Okay, so we've gone through the complete launch lineup there. At the time of recording, the next 4 Evercade cartridges are on the way. So there's Xenocrisis and Tanglewood coming up next. Those are two modern releases for the Mega Drive. The Oliver Twins collection, which is a bunch of Dizzy games and some of Codemaster's other early stuff. And 2 Atari Lynx collections. So I believe, if I remember correctly, Xenocrisis and Tanglewood and the Oliver Twins are coming in October, I think. And then Lynx stuff in November. So we'll almost certainly return to those at some point, and we'll have a look at the Pico Interactive collection in a bit more detail as well when we spent some more time with some of the more substantial games that are in there. Okay, before we wrap up, anything else you want to bring up?
No, just, I'm not paid to say this, but you need to own an Evercade, everybody.
Yes, definitely. I would get behind that as well. So it's a great system. It's got great games for it, and I can't say this enough, but Blaze have been brilliant at supporting it as well. So hang out on the official Evercade Discord. If you've got any questions or any concerns about any of the games or the hardware itself, be sure to talk to them, because this sounds like such a corporate line you get on thing, but they really are listening to people and taking action on sort of the most glaring issues that have come up as well. So be sure to involve yourself with the community if you want to talk to some like-minded retro gamers.
I think it's important just from a sensibility standpoint. Like, obviously all video games are made for money, right? It's like a for-profit industry. But like something boutique like the Evercade, unlike Sony or Nintendo or Microsoft, like, this feels like this was made for me. This doesn't feel like it was made to make money. This feels like this was made because they had a great idea that they thought would provide a service to the community, and they thought it was a viable economic model. But it doesn't feel like they're trying to wheedle me for money. It feels like they're trying to make a legitimate project tailored to a specific sensibility. And it just happens to be my sensibility. so I appreciate this product.
Yeah, same. Exactly the same. So if you want to know a bit more about the Evercade and any of the games on it, I've got a dedicated Evercade section on MoeGamer. You can get at it from the top navigation menu. What I've also got on there is where I could find them. I've provided links to PDFs of the original game manuals as well. So if you do get a manual with each Evercade cartridge, but it's just like a little bit of information about each game and the basic controls. So if you want to know a bit more about how to play the games or the context or like the full controls or full details about it as well, I've got links to PDFs of these manuals where they exist as well. They don't exist for everything because some of these games are prototypes or unreleased or have only come out on the Evercade so far, so it's not available for absolutely everything, but I've managed to find most of the manuals for these games as well, so be sure to check that out if you want to know a bit more as well. Alright, before we wrap up then, would you like to tell people where to find you online?
Sure, you can always check out my artwork at MrGilderPixels.com, and please consider following me on Instagram at MrGilderPixels. I also have a Twitch stream these days. Mr. Gilder Pixels is my name on there too, where I'm going to start trying to live stream some of my digital artwork when the mood strikes me. So please add that to your follow list too if you're active on Twitch.
Great stuff. And as always, you can find all my writing on MoeGamer.net and my YouTube stuff at youtube.com/Pete Davison. If you're listening to this podcast on SoundCloud or Spotify or any of the other services it's on, you can find a video version of this podcast over on YouTube where you can see footage of everything we've talked about. And if you're watching this on YouTube, there is also an audio-only feed that you can subscribe to via various means as well. So you can load that into your MP3 player or phone of choice and just listen on the go, which is nice. Anyway, just remains for us to say, as always, thank you very much for watching and or listening, and we'll see you again next time.